Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Glendale City Council meeting of July 18, 2006. Don't be surprised, Mr. Weaver's still the mayor, but he's not in town, so the mayor pro tem takes over for the next couple of weeks. Maybe have a roll call, please.
Council members Manukian.
Here.
Najarian.
Here.
Quintero.
Here.
Mayor Weaver. Mayor Pro Tem Yousefian.
Here. Our flag salute will be given by Council Member Najarian and invocation by our City Clerk, R.D. Katsakian. Please stand and face the flag.
Place your right hand over your heart. Repeat after me. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Let us pray this evening for humanity's indomitable spirit to dream and to reach for the heavens. 37 years ago, the United States of America sent man into space to walk on the moon. And on July 20, 1969, Neil Armstrong, Edwin Buzz Aldrin, and Michael Collins completed that mission, taking one small step for man but one giant leap for mankind. We pray for this spirit of exploration and of discovery, and that our leaders both on this dais and residents throughout our city will work to always strive, to seek, to find, and never to yield. Amen.
Amen. May we have your report, please?
The agenda for the July 18, 2006 regular meeting of the Glendale City Council was posted on Thursday, July 13, 2006 on the bulletin board outside City Hall.
What's next, please?
Agenda preview for the meeting of July 25, 2006.
Mr. City Manager?
Yes, I'll go to Bob McFall for the overview.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem and members of council. On the Housing Authority for next week, there will be a single item, a resolution of necessity for property that is located on Dorn Street. I don't have a specific address for that. On the city, pardon? Okay, looks like that's off. Okay. On the City Council meeting, I don't normally note items under the presentations and appointments, but there's two special presentations for two employees that will be receiving their 25-year award, a very significant presentation, Ron Mays and Lonnie Brown, both in the Neighborhood Services Department. Additionally, there are a number of action items. First, the Director of Parks and Recreation will be providing a report on a resolution appropriation for additional staff and consideration on some contract services, routine contract services. Secondly, the Director of Water and Power will be providing a report on grant funding for chromium-6 removal. There will be a report from the Director of Public Works on the status of the MSB and funding. And then lastly, there will be a selection or some recommendations on selection of CDBG advisory members. There will be two hearings. One is a vacation on Forest Avenue between Brand Boulevard and Glendale Avenue. And secondly, a historic resource designation, a Mills Act designation for 1480 Melwood Drive.
Thank you, Mr. McFall. What's next, please?
At 3B is reappointment of Ivan Insua for a second term to Design Review Board 2.
Okay. Is there a motion? Mr. Najarian.
Mr. Mayor, I have some comments first, and then I would be addressing the motion. I don't think that my short 14 months on council that I have received so many emails both supporting and opposing a potential commissioner, in this case, Mr. Insua, for the Design Review Board. Literally, I've received over, I'd say, about 60 emails in favor of his appointment and about 80 to 100 in opposition. I've heard personally from professionals who come before the board opposing him. I've also heard from those many residents who adamantly support him and insist that he is one of the best, if not the best, commissioners working for the city. And that's very unusual. And I had the opportunity to sit down with Mr. Insua and other candidates for this position in an extended interview. And you were there also, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem. One thing came clear to me, that Mr. Insua has impeccable professional credentials. He works for the Daily Architecture firm, which does incredible work worldwide, internationally renowned. His personal designs that he does are very appealing. He is employed in the position of a principal with that firm, so he takes responsibility for many of the designs which emanate from his office. On the flip side, I've heard that Mr. Insua can be brusque, can be rude, sarcastic, intimidating, and to become mired in the minutiae of a project and to micromanage it. I did raise these issues with Mr. Insua during our interview and laid my cards on the table that although I feel you're clearly quite a qualified architect, we're concerned about your people skills. And any opposition I have to his appointment would be based only on his ability to deal with members of the public, sometimes amateurs, sometimes professionals, who come before them with their projects, for their homes, etc., with often thousands of dollars at stake and perhaps many months of work hanging in the balance. I informed Mr. Insua that should I reappoint him for nomination to this commission, he is going to have to change his act. He's going to have to be more user-friendly. He's going to have to be more helpful, more accessible, and less micromanaging. My idea of a commissioner is one who makes comments, who makes criticism, but constructive criticism. I expect the commissioners on the DRB to help shepherd a project through their commission, not to dash it against the rocks and destroy all hope. Mr. Insua has assured me that he is going to take a more active role in being helpful towards the applicants before him. His last 6 months on the board have been much better than his first 2.5 years. Appointment of a commissioner does not mean that I'm going to turn a blind eye to any behavior which I personally see that's inappropriate or that I hear is inappropriate. I'm going to ask staff to please give me DVDs of all the DRB2 commission hearings so that I can personally monitor the behavior and observe if there is any inappropriate behavior. And if there is such, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem, with your approval, I will personally take it upon myself to discuss those issues with Mr. Insua to make sure that we can bring out the best of him in his abilities to shepherd these projects through and to get the input, his expertise as an architect. Therefore, I would move that Mr. Insua be reappointed to DRB2.
Thank you. And Mr.
Second it. And let me just say I'm very surprised to hear Mr. Najarian's comments about Mr. Insua. I've watched him on DRB for many years. I think he does an excellent job, and I don't ever remember him being curt or anything faintly resembling that. And I suggest you take a look at some of the other members of the DRB boards if you think Mr. Insua is out of line, because I've certainly seen other members who far surpass anything I've seen Mr. Insua do. But anyway, I think he's a great architect, and he does a good job, so I'm happy to second the nomination.
I also had an opportunity to talk to Mr. Insua. I did have my reservations. That's one of the reasons why I extended the time to discuss these issues with him. I did ask him to bring forward all of his portfolio, which he did, because from now on, everybody who's going to apply for design review, and if I happen to be on that committee, I'm going to look at the breadth of their work, not just their name or their application. I must say he is very qualified as what he does, but sometimes it's not how qualified it is and what you do. Your people skills is very important also. And so we did have some conversation, and I had kind of paid attention and watched every DRB2 meeting since his reappointment was on the dais. And he has definitely improved a lot in the way he deals with the public, and he has assured both of us that he will pay a little bit more attention to that. and how he relays his thoughts. And I think that's very important in DRB, whether it's one or two. When you give directions, you need to make sure that you're clear about your direction and relay that information so the applicant is able to use that information to move forward. So with that, roll call.
Council members Manukian,
Yes.
Najarian,
Yes.
Montero,
Yes.
Mayor Weaver, Mayor Pro Tem Yusefian.
Aye. What's next, please?
Next is reappointment, at 3C is reappointment of Ruby Salayan for the second term to the Traffic and Parking Commission.
I nominate Ruby Salayan for the Transportation and Parking Commission.
Is there a second?
Second?
There's a motion and a second. Roll call.
Council members Manukian,
Yes.
Najarian.
Yes.
Oh.
You have a speaker?
Oh, wait a second. Wait a second.
There is a speaker, I apologize. I just handed you the
Oh,
card.
you just handed this to
Yes.
me. Let me ask Mr. Allen to come back. Stop the motion. Sorry, Mr. Allen, I just got this.
You're
Barry Allen?
forgiven. I'm Barry Allen with Vanguard. Thank you, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem, Council, and staff. Very briefly, after listening to Mr. Najarian, I think it points out a need that Vanguard had pointed out in the past, that maybe each commission and board needs somebody from the council to be a liaison, to be able to maintain recognition of what they're doing. Also, I think you need to have certain standards, and you need to have some question of and some method of measuring what each of the people do. I've heard statements made about people that didn't do anything, and obviously those were incorrect. Now I hear about 140 emails all about one particular board member. So I think that somehow or other, this council needs to have input from the day that somebody is appointed until it's time for their either reappointment or dismissal. We watched two commissioners kicked off of their commissions last year, and it's really time to put some standards and some measurements as to what you're doing. I'm Barry Allen for Vanguard for accountability.
Mr. Allen, this was about 3C that deals with Mr. Sulian. Do you have
Yeah.
an issue with that?
No, I don't have an issue with it, but
It's
it's
just in
in general from the particular topic on the award and reappointment to commission and board seats.
Thank you very much. There was a motion and a roll call, motion and a second. Maybe have a roll call again.
Council members Manukian,
Yes.
Najarian,
Yes.
Montero,
Yes.
Mayor Weaver,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Yusefian.
Aye. Sorry, Dave. What's next, please?
Next is city council or staff comments.
Mr. Manukian.
Yes. First, this gentleman in the wheelchair, as he was coming in, me and him together had a hard time opening the door to get him through. Are the renovations going to include ADA compliant doors at this?
Doors here.
Yes.
Yes, they absolutely are.
And what are we doing in the meantime? I think we should have something in place in the meantime, so individuals, I mean, me and him together, we had a hard time getting him in the door today. What are we doing in the meantime to accommodate those who cannot get in the chamber?
You see Steve wants to respond there.
You can respond to that later. The second issue is, we were talking about impact fees a while ago. What is the status of that? Is it coming, not coming? I've been trying to look for a schedule as to where they are.
It is coming. Thought we had a date. Yeah. Yeah, it's in 2 or 3 weeks.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay,
August
thank you.
1's the target date.
Thank you, that's it.
Would you like an answer to your question?
No, I just think that staff should do something
Yeah.
about those doors.
We'll take a look at the doors and see what
Mr.
we can do
Quintero.
in the interim.
I wanted to nominate Armand Kavanian to the Arts and Culture Board or Commission.
Okay. And this is which is the one
Arts
that,
and Culture.
Arts and culture.
oh, the one that you.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Is there any other appointment?
No appointments.
Okay. Any other council comments? Okay. You have comments?
Yes, I do.
Go ahead.
I don't want to steal your thunder, though.
Mr. Najarian, no? I'm running the meeting. I do less talking, and you guys do the talking.
How about that? I think a report is in order on the Independent Cities Association, a seminar which was held. Is this the appropriate time, Mr. Howard, or does it need to be agendized?
No, it is.
If you like, brief personal report.
There was a seminar held in San Diego for the ICA, Independent Cities Association, which was attended by all four of the present councilmen. We were briefed on a variety of very pertinent subjects relating to municipalities and their operation. Just to go over some, we received a seminar on crisis management. We received a very pertinent discussion on the eminent domain, in particular the Proposition 90, which is going to be coming before the voters in November, and perhaps some later point we can get into the details and explain the ins and outs of that. We had a seminar on government ethics. We had housing in the Southland. We had a discussion of the pros and cons of filming and filming permits. We discussed probably the most interesting was a lunchtime seminar in which we were given a presentation by the supervisor of the FBI agents and the U.S. attorney in charge of political corruption, and they went through a good hour and a half of the detailed elements of the crimes of bribery, some other crimes as well besides racketeering,
You name it.
etc. I guess the one point that they asked us to take out to the public is, should you feel that your public officials are in any way committing crimes, taking bribes, which I think has been floated by us a few times in the past, do not, I repeat, do not announce that publicly. Please call them in their Los Angeles office. The FBI hotline is available. It's on the internet and in directory assistance, because to announce it publicly would be to tip the wrongdoer off and perhaps his co-conspirators as well, and they would begin efforts to cover up the traces of their crime. So if you think we're doing something wrong, the FBI says call them directly. Don't take up the time in public communications. And speaking of public communications, at the seminar, Mr. Yusufian and I had a chance to sit with the mayor of Santa Monica, and we were talking about a few items and realizing that they're a much more liberal city than we are here in Glendale. The issue of oral communications and public speaking during council meetings came up, and I was surprised to hear, very surprised, that the great city of Santa Monica, who strives every day to protect individual rights as well as the Constitution, limits all speakers to no more than 6 minutes total during any meeting involving the city council. 6 minutes total. If you go over 6 minutes, they do bring out the hook and you're sitting down. So I think in comparison to Santa Monica, we're quite liberal in terms of our
That's 6 minutes for that day.
6 minutes for that day total.
That's it.
So it was very interesting.
Any other comments?
You didn't give the FBI number.
I do have the FBI number, actually. But
I'd like to add on while he's looking for the FBI number. I think the other thing that the two agents, which I found it interesting, they're very young, but the list of accomplishment was just amazing. Very dedicated, and their main message to all the politicians sitting in that room was, if it takes us 1,000 agents, we'll bring down 1,000 agents. If we have to wiretap, we will do the wiretap. We will do whatever it is to get you. And the other two things that they said, that it's a thing that you should not do besides talking about it in public, do not go and talk about it in the media. And the last one is do not send information anonymously. So if you're going to send information over to FBI, make sure your name and address and phone number is on it. And also do not go to the Attorney General. He cannot help you. You got to call the FBI direct. And their number is?
Their number, and you'd like to speak to Mike Elliott, who is the supervising special agent. I don't see anybody taking notes over there in the fourth row. Supervising special agent at 310-477-6565. Mike Elliott, FBI, supervising special agent.
Mr. Mnuchin.
A couple of other issues that they presented was housing and the ports, and the most important issue on both of these issues was the growth. Growth is coming, and how we're going to deal with it. The ports of L.A. and Los Angeles were very important. I didn't know what the ports had to do with the city of Glendale or the surrounding areas, but I learned quite a bit about the economic impact of the ports as well as the overall impact. To not just to Southern California, but to the southwestern region of the United States. So, as well as some security issues that they dealt with. So, but the important message I took from it is that growth is here. 3 million people coming to Southern California. How are we going to 6 million? How are we going to deal with it with traffic, housing, and some of the other issues that go along with it?
Right. And one of the items, and I think part of the reason you're getting a lot of this information is under the new rules that the state has passed. It is pretty much a prerequisite and requirement for public agencies when agency members go to any of these seminars and the taxpayers are paying for that. It is important when they return, they give a report. So you don't think that we went over there and did nothing but play golf and then came back. So it is, I think that was a good rule when it was passed, because in past I've seen seminars half empty because people are out there doing something else, and some of us would show up to every other meeting, and then our wives will be yelling at us, is like, how come you're going and the others aren't? So now it was refreshing to go to these meetings and see the rooms packed. As a matter of fact, on Prop 90, it was standing room only. And there is a proposition that is masked under eminent domain. What it does, it takes away all land use rights from government, period. You reduce the size of the house, you pay the guy. You reduce the height, you pay the guy. You reduce the number of units, you pay the guy. And you barely will have any rights of doing any eminent domain for even public use, because at any time that use changes, you have to sell it back to the original person or his heirs, and they keep the old tax base. So some people are calling it the eminent domain. Some people are calling it, what was the name they called it?
Taxpayer trap.
Taxpayer trap. It has passed in Oregon. They have 2,000 lawsuits, $4 billion worth. Just imagine what will happen in this city. But nevertheless, I thought that was a very good seminar. We got a lot out of there. And so.
Yes, off the seminar, unless someone else wanted to make a comment. I have another item, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, please.
The Metropolitan Transportation Authority, the MTA, has just completed a feasibility study of the extension and completion of the 710 freeway from approximately where it dead ends in just south of South Pass. What city is that? Alhambra.
South Pass, Alhambra.
Alhambra, tunneling below South Pass to pop up again just in the Pasadena area at the Del Mar Road interchange. And it is going to have, if constructed, and it's not in the construction phase, this is just a feasibility study, I think it would have some dramatic impacts on our freeway system. Therefore, I would like, Mr. Mayor, to put on the agenda and to invite someone from the MTA to make a presentation before the council, and they are seeking input from the affected localities to take with them and put in their planning document. And as soon as we could get that on the agenda, the MTA has a staff person ready to do the presentation. All we need to do is find a time slot for them. I think that's all we need to. I'm sure there's a lot more to putting it on the agenda than that, but
Interest
at
in
our
what we have,
earliest
Council?
opportunity, I would like
Like to
it
do
to
that?
come before
Yeah.
us.
Yeah, I see 3 nods, so 4.
Okay.
Please schedule that as soon as possible. And on the issue of ports, one good news is there is a new law that has been signed and had gone to effect, and it was negotiated between the Port Authority, the people who drive the trailer trucks, and the City of Long Beach, which in the next few years, they're going to transfer movement of the goods from morning to night. That will take 6 million trucks a day off the freeways during 7 to 7 p.m. So they will move at night. That is a huge amount of trucks that move every day. And as far as number of people that are going to be added, they told us 500,000 people a year going to be added to the state of California. That's equivalent to City of Long Beach every year to 2020. So people are here, vehicles are here, we just need to deal with it. Anyway, what's next, please?
Next is consent items, including minutes. The following are routine and may be acted upon by one motion. Any member of the council or the audience requesting separate consideration may do so by making such request before a motion is proposed.
How many cards?
Okay,
Is there
yes,
a
I
motion?
have one card. Actually, I have card for 5C and D. Do I have a motion for 5A?
I'll move the rest.
Second.
There's a motion, a second. Roll call, please, for 5A.
Council members Menuchyan,
Yeah,
Or,
for the rest of them.
yes.
Council members Najarian.
Yes.
Quintero,
Yes.
Mayor Weaver, Mayor Pro Tem Yousefian.
Aye. Please read 5B, 5C into the record.
5C is Director of Administrative Services regarding Horizon Health contract renewal for the Employee Assistance Program, EAP. And 5C1 is motion approving and accepting the amendment to extend the agreement for a sum not to exceed $70,000 for a one-year period from May 1, 2006 through April 30, 2007, subject to City Attorney approval.
Okay. You guys need a report on this?
Has the fee increased?
Mr. Starbird?
Matt Doyle, is this yours? Monica?
Monica Fisher, Health Services Administrator.
And also, could you tell us for the public what EAP is?
It's the Employee Assistance Program, provides a short-term counseling for the employees here for numerous different type of non-mental health issues, but for just short-term problems and concerns, as well as supports us in our any mandatory referrals that we might have to assist our employees.
Give me an example of one.
One of them is through our Department of Transportation drug testing. If we have positive drug tests, the employees are sent there for evaluation through their substance abuse professionals.
We should, employees can use the service voluntarily as well as made available to them with a certain number of initial sessions they can have if they're having family difficulties, other issues that might affect them. They can utilize it sort of like it's an adjunct to our health benefit program. But as Monica points out, it's also useful in, for example, disciplinary cases, whether it's due to alcohol, substance abuse, anger management, or those kinds of things. We have a method to refer employees for counseling and therapy as a condition of their disciplinary action.
Okay.
With
Thank-
respect to the rate, is there an increase in the rate?
No,
So the rate stays the same.
rate stays the same.
I like, if you would sit in front, I would appreciate it.
certainly.
I have a speaker, Dr. Richard Espiritu, 3 minutes. Your name for the record, please.
Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem. My name is Dr. Richard Espiritu. Mr. Mayor, a number of years ago in the insurance industry, used to have agents, insurance agents go around and collect the money from the individuals, and then they would collect their commissions from the insurance company. It was called double dipping. This particular program, and I did go on the website and look at it, they provide mental health, substance abuse, child abuse, anger management, all kinds of other things. But they are a direct referral source to your existing organizations, such as Blue Cross. I happen to have known Bill Guy and Phil Barnhart, who designed Blue Cross, PPO and HMO. And all the services that this Horizon Health provides is already part of your program. Either Cigna, the Blue Cross HMO, or Kaiser, all these services are provided. Why are we paying twice for the same service? Unless this is strictly for the issue of a workman's comp issue where an employee was caught drinking or has elevated substance elevation, but that falls into a different category. This really doesn't call into an employee assistance program. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Yeah. Is this covered?
Actually, it's not. Small counseling sessions to, like marital counseling and those type of things, are not covered under medical benefits. Medical benefits only cover mental health problems. So like people that need medication or long-term things such as schizophrenia, bipolar diseases, those type of things. Short-term problems with your children, relationship issues, those are not covered. And these are covered under our EAP.
So as I noted, this is a supplement to our existing group health program. It would be for those things not otherwise covered by the group health program, of which, as Monica notes, there could be a good number of them in an organization this size.
Okay. Is there a motion?
I'll move 5C1.
Second.
Is there a motion and a second? Roll call, please.
Council members Manukian,
Yes.
Najarian,
Yes.
Quintero,
Yes.
Mayor Weaver, Mayor Pro Tem Yusefian.
No. What's next, please? Read 5D.
5D is Director of Parks, Recreation, and Community Services regarding construction of the Adams Square Mini Park, spec number 3191. At 5D1 is resolution rejecting all bids, dispensing with further competitive bidding, and authorizing city manager or his designee to enter into an executive and execute a contract with Vito Samarzic, Inc. in an amount not to exceed $878,000 plus $87,800 contingency.
Okay. And with that, I'll go to Mr. Starbird.
Did you have a card on this?
Yes.
Okay, do you want to report before we?
Oh, short one.
Okay. I'm going to go to George Chapchin, Director of Parks and Recreation, for a brief report. George?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Starbird. We did have 3 bids on this project, and Vito Samarzic is the lowest bidder. What happened was all 3 bidders didn't include information they should have included in the bid packet in the supplemental, and that's why we're here before you to reject all bids and use the base bid for the construction project.
So our discussions would be with the low bidder?
Low bidder.
With the low bidder.
Yes.
It saves us having to reject and go back out to bid again on this project, which would frankly cost us considerable time and probably more money, given the current tendency for prices to increase. So.
Let me second guess Mr. Spiritu that maybe I shouldn't, but I have a feeling, is this park going to be ADA
Absolutely.
compatible?
It is ADA
We're not going to
compatible.
have tables that people can't get behind it, or? Okay.
It will be ADA.
Okay. Mr. Spiritu. Your name for the
Evening,
record
Mr.
again.
Mayor, City Council, and staff. I am Dr. Richard Espiritu. Last week, Mr. Yusefian, you raised the issue about the bathrooms at the Cerritos Park, and I wanted to thank you for raising the question if they were going to be ADA compliant. One of the other things that was discussed was the Maple Park, and that was supposed to be renovated. And I hope to God that once these renovations and the new parks are created for the citizens of the city of Glendale, that they will comply. And one of the best examples of an ADA compliant park here in the city of Glendale is Palmer Park. That meets every guideline. The only problem with that Palmer Park is it doesn't have sufficient parking, but that belongs to another issue. So I hope the Market will have a great park, and it will be ADA compliant, and it'll have the walkways and everything that is needed. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We have a motion for that item?
So moved.
Second.
Second. There's a motion second. Roll call, please.
Council members Manukian,
Yes.
Najarian,
Yes.
Quintero,
Yes.
Mayor Weaver, Mayor Pro Tem Yusefian.
Aye. What's next, please?
Next is oral communication. Discussion is limited to items not a part of this agenda. Each speaker is allowed 5 minutes. Council may question or respond to the speaker, but there will be no debate or decision. The city manager may refer the matter to the appropriate department for investigation and report.
Okay. First one, Patrick Massey. Your name for the record, please. 5 minutes.
Members of the City Council, my name is Patrick Massey. I do have a presentation. Members of the City Council, I was here earlier today. Unfortunately, the PowerPoint presentation did not work, and I want to thank Rich Wells for giving me a call this afternoon. He asked me to bring in the disc, and I have brought in the disc, and we're going to go over this important issue, which is about the 6200 San Fernando Road proposed project. What many members of the public don't know is that the city has agreed with the United Cerebral Palsy to build a 24-unit, 540 square feet studios for the disabled at a cost of about $10 million. And we've learned that each 540 square foot studio is going to cost more than $260,000 to build, which is mind-boggling. So today, I'm going to actually go through this and explain what went on. Former contractor Robert Hamlet Yusefian, a.k.a. Bob Yusefian, who has an inactive contractor's license number 00492039, contends that it will cost $260,000 to build a 540 square foot studio for the disabled at 6200 San Fernando Road. Why is Bob Yusefian misleading the public? According to the ADA, the showers for disabled should be barrier-free and free of glass doors and walls, which cost about $800 to $1,500, depending on what kind of specifications you want. These already come pre-packaged. The walls are there. You simply push it into the area that you want it to actually go into. Now, a regular tub with glass door that all of us have in our own homes costs anywhere from $700 to $1,000. The tub is about $260, and you spend another $400 or $500 for the sliding glass door or doors that open. So overall, you're looking at about $500 more for an ADA tub or shower versus a regular shower at our own homes. And this is basically what it looks like. Now, special faucets have to be placed into these units. The faucets cost $160 because of their long handle, which gives the people with disabilities easier access. The regular faucets that we have in our own homes, depending on what kind of a faucet you have, range anywhere from $400 to $300. Some fancy faucets do cost close to $300. Depends on what type you like. Special toilet handles. An ADA bathroom should have these. And basically the cost for these handles are about $280. This is an extra cost that many of us do not have in our own homes. And this is a requirement, which is a necessity for the people with disabilities. The cabinets have to be lowered for easy access, obviously, because people are on a wheelchair. And if you notice, the bottom cabinets are missing in order to allow wheelchairs to have an easier access. The cost of the cabinets is actually the same. Now, if you go to a fancier cabinet version with the maple and all the bells and whistles, it's going to cost an extra $1,500 to put these cabinets in. Now, this cost is based on the motorized version that exists in some fancy apartment units where the actual unit does drop down with a push of a button. So the cabinets up there can actually be brought down so people can have easier access. And if you can see the railing back there, which does have a small motor which lowers the cabinets, and that's the extra cost of $1,500 in order to actually place these in the units. Now, according to the United Cerebral Palsy, and this is based on their website, the pictures that come from their websites, you see there are 2 sample kitchens here. And to be honest with you, these are very simple kitchens. In fact, one thing that shocked me is that under the sink, you have cabinets. And, if somebody's on a wheelchair, how could they actually slide down and actually do their washings? Because technically, that should be missing. There shouldn't be any cabinets under the sink. And these particular cabinets, based on the website pictures that appear on the United Cerebral Palsy website, are not motorized. The upper cabinets cannot be lowered. So apparently they're just doing a basic job there. Kitchen sink has to be lowered as is pictured here. The cost is none. You simply lower the actual sink to a level where it will accommodate somebody on a wheelchair. That's no cost. That's basically the same thing, except you simply place it at a lower level. Now, if you do the math, the showers are going to cost about $500 more per unit. The faucets are going to cost, close to about $200 extra per unit. Emergency light and communication devices that have to be placed in the actual studio. These are the small lights that go on top of the door, which basically tells the workers at this facility that somebody's in trouble if there's an emergency. You also have communication two-way devices where they can actually talk to somebody in the main office. The cost is about $250. If I can have another 2 minutes, please. The toilet handles cost an extra $280. The cabinets cost an extra $1,500. And electronic door openers, if they want to have push button to open the doors, will cost an extra $800. The total extra cost per unit is anywhere from $3,500 to roughly about $4,000 per unit. And this is basically the extra cost that will have to go into these units. So if it's going to cost about $3,500 to $4,000 more per unit compared to a regular non-handicapped units, then why is Bob Yousefian justifying spending $260,000 per unit for this project? 3 active licensed contractors have stated the real cost of a 540 square foot unit to be anywhere around $85,000 to $95,000. So why are we going to spend an extra $175,000 a unit of taxpayer money for this project? And that's what the main question is. It's time for Bob Yousefian to come clean with his calculations for 6200 to 6206 San Fernando Road, or simply keep his inert opinions to himself. Why are the taxpayers being asked to fill the pockets of the rich developer with profits? Why is the city management and city council pushing for this project amidst public and ADA advocate objections? And why build a 24-unit complex for the disabled right across 10 mechanic shops and the railroad tracks at a cost of more than $10 million? And by the way, a majority of that is funded by state and federal tax money. Why is the developer architect asking for a parking variance for this project? That brings me to the end of my presentation. Any questions, Mr. Yousefian?
Yes. When was the last time you built any multifamily or residential housing in City of Glendale or any other city?
I do not have a contractor's license.
Thank you very much.
Have you built any,
Next.
Mr. Yousefian?
Yes, I have.
How many?
I have built several. Thank you very much. I've built multifamily, offices, and single-family residents, and also worked on some shops that are in the malls. Dr. Richard Espiritu, let's not forget there's a lot of other things that go into a building besides just showers and handles and faucets.
Good evening, Mayor, City Council and staff. I am Dr. Richard Espiritu. Mr. Mnuchin, I thank you for raising the question about the doors here at the City Council chamber. Mr. Zern, I'd like to thank you personally for putting together the added parking spaces over in the public parking lot. But I hope the next time you do that, the lines are done straight, not done by hand. Mr. McFall, we had a gentleman here today who was in a motorized wheelchair, and you have done a magnificent job of putting together the City Council chambers to be ADA compliant. We have hearing devices for people today. When are you going to have the seats for the people who are in wheelchairs. I hope that's coming along soon. Mr. Yusefian, one of the things that happened, I had a long talk with Mr. Matt Doyle, and I came to an understanding that there were only 2 individuals who are working for the city of Glendale that are that are classified as ADA. It's very interesting because the percentage, according to what I understand, there's approximately 2,400 employees for the city of Glendale. That's less than 0.2%. Our sister cities, Burbank and Pasadena, have 10 and 15%. This is, Mr. Kasakian, would you give this to the city council members and to Mr. Howard? This is a report that was published by the Department of Economic EEOC, published by the Council for the ADA. One of the interesting things it talks about here is equal employment opportunity. They talk about applicants being able to get information. They have the ability to be informed and have accessibility to jobs that are done here in this that are part of the city of Glendale. Several months ago, actually over a year ago, when we were discussing the B line, the rerouting the number 7, I provided the City Council with information regarding the number of ADA people who are working within the City of Glendale. It's very interesting that there is approximately 15,000 people who reside within the City of Glendale, according to the 2000 census, that are classified as disabled under the federal government.
In the city of Glendale?
In the City of Glendale, by all the census tracts. How come we only have 2 people who are employed by the City of Glendale? One of them works for the Verdugo Job Center. The other one is hearing impaired and works for, I guess, for the Department of Public Works. This document was signed by the federal government and issued as of 3/1 of '99, and if my figures serve me correctly, that's 7 years ago. Why are we only having 2 people who are working for the City of Glendale? One of the individuals who has appeared here several times in front of this City Council was a lady who was visually impaired by the name of Bonnie Adams. Previously, before she moved out here to California, she worked for the IRS. The IRS can hire her. Why can't the City of Glendale? Basically because nobody is letting us know what type of jobs are there. I think there is some type of discrimination by the Commission of Civil Service and even possibly by the Department of Human Resources to get our disabled people working in the City of Glendale. I understand that the federal government is passing some new regulations for home employment, and they're giving bonuses and all kinds of good stuff. I also provided that information to our ADA coordinator, Mrs. Jasmine Mears. Thank you very much for your time and courtesy.
Thank you. Matt, we have only 2 people working in the city?
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, I did have a conversation with Mr. Spiritu a few months ago, and it was a very informal conversation, and I had no idea the numbers were going to be thrown back here. But essentially, he asked me, to my knowledge, how many employees we have who are either wheelchair bound or obviously impaired, either with visual impairment or hearing impairment. And at the time, I was only able to identify 2. We have a variety of employees who do have other disabilities, so I'm certain it's not as obvious. We have numerous employees who do have work restrictions due to either work injuries or just general physical conditions, who we are obligated under both state and federal law with providing the appropriate accommodations, which we have accommodated. In fact, we have a very good record of having done so. We have many employees throughout the organization working in what's called modified assignments, both on a permanent basis and a temporary basis. So I will say we do have a very good record relative to accommodating employees with disabilities.
Thank you. Barry Allen?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem, Council staff. I'm Barry Allen from Vanguard. I'm going to read you an oath. I do solemnly swear that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of California against all enemies, foreign and domestic, that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of California, that I take this obligation freely without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion, and that I will and faithfully discharge the duties upon which I'm about to enter. That's an oath that each of you took when you assumed your office. One of the things that in the Constitution and the Bill of Rights and the First Amendment that is made applicable to the states under the 14th Amendment. And partially that amendment speaks to the freedom of the press, the freedom of speech. And one of the issues that comes up is who is the press? In general, courts have defined the press so as to include all publishers. The Second U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals, for example, has said that First Amendment protections extend to every, quote, every sort of publication which affords a vehicle of information and opinion. It's from Von Bulow versus Von Bulow, and the citations are here. Now, I bring this up because on or about the week of July 14th, copies of the Vanguard newsletter and other materials for the public that are usually left in the lobby were removed. Mayor Weaver, according to his comments on the Larry Zarian show last Thursday, indicated that he had them removed with the consent and authorization of the city attorney, Mr. Howard, which I would really find difficult to believe that Mr. Howard would ever sanction a violation of the First Amendment. Now, I think that's it's sort of a bad position for anyone on this council to take, to remove media, especially media that meets that criteria, a vehicle of information and opinion, one that is circulated freely throughout this community and also to a number of the city employees and to each of the city council members. And I think that this council should at least render an apology, and I think they should at least, if those facts are true, relative to what Mr. Weaver said regarding he and Mr. Howard on the Zarian show, I think at least he should be admonished and reminded of that oath that said he will support the Constitution of the United States. Now, it doesn't say he's going to support the charter of the city of Glendale, but the Constitution of the United States. And I think this is something that we should all be concerned with because it flies right in the face of those particular rights that we all cherish and we hold very highly, rights that we have fought wars over to maintain, rights that we indicate whenever we stand and salute the flag and say the Pledge of Allegiance, things that we do when we hang flags. It shows our patriotism, and that's part of it. And I think that that was a very wrong thing to do, and I think that the proper action should be taken by this particular body. Now, on a lighter side, as you'll notice, we had Vanguard had several people here who were acting as greeters and passing out materials about how to behave, how to act, how to do things with regard to the city council. And I will pass these out over to Mr. Kasakian so that you can indeed read what we were attempting to do and we will continue to do. And on one side it has the one-page Brown Act, and of course the other is Welcome to the Glendale City Council. And by the way, if you're watching on television or on the computer, those will be available from Vanguard. Thank you very much. I'm Barry Allen for Vanguard.
Thank you very much, Mr. Manukian.
Mr. Allen, this is the first I hear of it, that it was Mr. Weaver who removed them. But you asked, or I don't know if that's true or not, but you asked the council to apologize. If it was one council member, and as you know, if I err in my ways, I'd be more than willing to apologize. But forgive me for not apologizing, since I had nothing to do with it, and for the life of me, I don't know why it would be removed. But that's a whole other issue. But you asked the council as a body to apologize. I don't think that's going to happen. Just so.
Did you know I can't comment?
Yes.
Thank you.
I
Mr.
don't mind
Howard?
if you comment.
Could you enlighten on this thing, because all of us were at somewhere else in San Diego. We weren't watching Larry Zarian's show.
And Mr. Mayor, members of council, neither was I. And Mr. Allen was kind enough to send me an email reflecting that what occurred was not at Mr. Weaver's request. Mr. Weaver happened to be informed of what happened, but it was not at his request. Simply what occurred was the tree wells downstairs and the seating benches were littered with random papers. Amongst those included Vanguard. Myself and Mr. Starbird came in one morning, and it was like mothers looking at a dirty child's room. So this is a mess. There's papers all over the place, and we basically scooped up the papers and took them out.
Did that include all the papers, or just
anything that was on the bench and on the tree well?
Okay.
So is Mr. Allen forbidden from putting stuff down there?
I have to check and see if that area, again, it's a question I was going to actually ask tomorrow, whether or not that area has been treated by city staff as a open public forum. I don't believe it is. And if it is not, then the First Amendment does not allow individuals to come in and place whatever they would like to place there.
There's a corner where a number of newspapers have been put there on the first floor.
There's a bench for seating that...
No, not the bench. When you come down the stairs, there's
Like the old
on
phone.
the right. I know Glendale Focus was there, Business Life.
Yeah, I know there's wire stands for bus schedules, and there's a wire stand for 8.5 by 11 inch city flyers from the Parks Department and from other departments. I'm not aware of any location where there are magazines that are sanctioned to be kept other than those that are printed by the city for public information.
Mr. Starbird and Mr. Najarian.
Mr. Mayor, I think that's the key in the conversation Mr. Howard and I had, and that is whether or not there is a place within the lobby area that becomes a public forum, so to speak, for handouts, whether they be deemed a newspaper, they be deemed something else. What we have had is when one item is left, there tend to be other items that begin to collect. We do have racks for public information, brochures and things provided by the city, the MTA, the AQMD, those kinds of things. Frankly, what happens is there are times when groups, whether they be nonprofit, sometimes commercial groups, will bring in flyers, they'll drop them off, they get left on almost any flat area in the lobby area. And the issue that arises is whether or not it becomes a public forum, and certainly what is the appropriateness of utilizing that space, whether they be nonprofit or for-profit. So there needs to be some regulation of that. We don't have an area where newspapers are made available, so we need to address that issue.
Mr. Najarian.
I don't want to get into a Brown Act violation, so I would like this to come back on that subject as to what constitutes a public space and what policy the council currently has or wishes to develop regarding the placement of for-profit, nonprofit, et cetera, literature in the city hall area.
Well, the council doesn't have any policy.
There is no policy.
There's no policy.
There is no written policy. I mean, essentially, we use a typical forum analysis, just like
I'd like to discuss it,
Right.
but I don't think now is the appropriate
not for
forum,
a
so
detailed discussion.
If you could put that, if no one would object, I'd like to just discuss that at a later meeting.
Okay.
Okay. Next item is Herbert Milano. Your name for the record, please.
Good evening. My name is Herbert Milano, Mayor Pro Tem Josefian, members of the City Council, city staff. I believe for the past 3 years I've come here during the hottest day of the year to promote the concept of an aquatic facility for Glendale, particularly because this is one of the largest cities in Los Angeles County. It is perhaps one of the only city over 100,000 that doesn't have a municipal aquatic facility. I'm thankful that you allocated $60,000 towards a study of where to put an aquatic facility. But it's been 3 years now since I've been talking about it, and the deficiency is incredible. The last couple of days, we've had some of the hottest weather across the nation. And I know that comparable cities, like Henderson, Nevada, they're a little bit larger, about 20,000 more, they have 10 aquatic facilities. And I think it reflects a lot on it reflects a lot on us, on our government. It reflects a lot on how we think of those who are not able to vote, our youth, who don't necessarily have a voice. And I think that reflects on our quality of life significantly. You know, we talk about having facilities for youth. We talk about having opportunities for our youth to have resources enough so that we don't have the high school dropout rate that we have. And I think it reflects a lot on our values. It used to be that the Democratic Party cared enough about those who are least able to voice their needs. And when I went to Mr. Krikorian's election celebration, Mr. Youssefian, you were there, Mr. Najarian, you were there, Mr. Manukian, you were there. And I think that those values have to do about taking care of those individuals who have the least means with which to promote their need. What I find incredible is that, and even though the Democratic Party for a long time care about the unions, especially those individuals who are struggling to get an honest day's wage for an honest day pay, they don't seem to get the same type of support that the unions where well-paid individuals are receiving the benefits. So I look at this comparison. I look at the $10 million of additional pay and pensions that police and fire got, and I look at the fact of our youth without an aquatic swimming pool. The need for those additional pay benefits, you know, have the statement of urgent ordinance, but our youth don't have it. So what is it, Mr. Quintero? I really don't know what is the Democratic Party anymore and what it stands for. You know, why do we celebrate it? You know, it is those individuals in the southern part of Glendale that have the greatest needs for the largest parks, and yet we don't seem to be paying attention to them. But have a big developer want to come in and build something on this parcel, you are all over yourselves trying to figure out, or at least that's my perception, on how to assist them. I think that we need to rethink what a city government is really for. It is for the benefit of the residents who currently live there, not for future residents who may come in, not for the developers who will come in and build something large and then give you campaign contributions. It's for the little guy. It's for the families. It's for the neighborhoods. It's for the people who reside. You are there to service the public. And I get the feeling that we simply lost our way. You know, if you only had one term, Mr. American, if this were your last term, what would you like to be remembered for? What accomplishment? I believe in term limits simply because it forces you to achieve a vision of something and say, during my 4 years or my 8 years, this is what I will accomplish. And other than the Americana, you know, and other than giving the tremendous raises and increasing our general budget, I have a hard time really trying to assess what your vision is for the city. And that's my concern. The things that I talked about are create a vision, tell us what you really stand for, and make it happen. But right now we have a lot of inequity and a lot of needs, and I don't see them being addressed. Thank you.
Thank you. I think it's very obvious that most of us wanted the aquatic center, and I think we kind of tried to do everything possible to keep it at least in the budget. And you can be assured that we have lobbied like crazy to whoever is going to be the next assemblyman or senator or whatever it is, even in Washington, we're trying to find ways to find money to do it. So I understand it's hot. I know how that is. I'm sometimes outside, but and we'd like to get that going. And as going back to the ICA, there was a person there who was acting as the President Teddy Roosevelt for 45 minutes. He really got into it. And he said something very important. And this is Teddy Roosevelt talking. He says, you're successful if the job you're doing, you act as it's your last job. This is the only job you have. Then you do a good job. I can tell you, this is the only political job that I have. And I'm not thinking about going anywhere or anything else. So whatever I do in here, I'm pretty sure with some of my colleagues, we do our darnest to make sure it's the best that we have to do. With that, Margaret Hammond. We'll probably disagree with that. But hey, it's a free country. God bless America. Hi, Margaret.
Hello.
You look nice and summery.
Thank you. My name is Margaret Hammond, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem, and the City Council and staff. I'm here tonight. I'm going to start off with a subject that I think you'll be happy with. I know some of my subjects you are very unhappy with, but this one is pleasant. I am the chair of the committee for Clean and Beautiful Glendale this year. And the members of our group are volunteers working with the cooperation and help of staff of neighborhood services to make Glendale a healthy, safe, clean environment in which to live, work, and play. On behalf of my colleagues, I would like to invite you, your family and friends, and all Glendale residents to attend our upcoming fundraising event, a summer night on the plaza on July the 21st from 6 to 8 p.m. in Perkins Plaza, which is 141 North Glendale Avenue. This fun-filled family gathering will feature food and desserts from some of Glendale's best restaurants and bakeries, and live entertainment and door prizes, a silent auction, and an exhibition of the finalists in our first My Hometown photo contest. Those attending the event will vote for their favorite photograph, which best symbolizes the theme, My Hometown. And 2 lucky winners will receive $100 each. Also, to recognize the city's centennial celebration, we worked very closely with city staff to print the first official Glendale city map. And we underwrote the cost of that map from the funds that we have raised in the past for the printing of it. All those in attendance at the event will receive a free copy, and so make sure you attend. And it's the first actual official map that has ever been done for the city. And the staff worked on it, and as I say, we underwrote the cost. And at this time, I would like to give you all hot off the press copies. These just came right from the printer. I know nobody has seen them, and we're really very excited. And we, as I said, pardon? Well, this is so you'll know your way around town. You won't get lost, okay? All the proceeds from the event will be used toward programs which enhance the quality of life for our community. Every dollar we raise helps fund our in-school education programs like I Love My Neighborhood poster contest and the Junior Ambassadors, which has been very successful. It's really been very in the middle schools. Environmental improvement projects like the Great American Cleanup Weekend and the Adopt-A-Block, and neighborhood pride programs such as the GEM, Property Maintenance, and Jewel Neighborhood Awards. This is just the tip of the iceberg of the programs offered by our committee with the help of the of the staff of the neighborhood services. We couldn't do it without them, I'll tell you that. We're a bunch of old duffers, and we believe in Glendale, and we want to work hard to make it good. But, we're not always up to doing a lot of the work that the staff of the neighborhood services does for us. I encourage all of those who have participated in our programs to attend the event. We need your continued support to continue to offer these programs. You can help us in our mission by purchasing tickets for the event. Tickets are only $10 for adults and $5 for children under 12. If you contact Julie Shermer at the Neighborhood Services Office at 818-550-4508, or just stop by the Neighborhood Services Office to purchase your tickets, or you can just pay at the door. We'll be happy to see you. Wear your Hawaiian shirt or sarong or hula skirt. And we're going to have fun. It's going to be fun. And I want to thank you for your time and support, and look forward to seeing all of you, all the people, residents, and all of you that can come to our event on Friday evening. We do work hard at it, and we have been working hard. So I thank you about that. Now, onward and upward, my favorite subject, right? I'm done with it. My banquet halls. And I'm sorry, and I did have some things to say, but I did promise my group that I would promote our event because we've, want to show the city what a great group and what we've been doing in the city.
Did a good job. Thank you. Jonathan Picard. Last card. Your name for the record, please.
Hi, my name is Jonathan Picard. Hello, council, staff. I've been watching Channel 6 for several years, and I realized this is a channel for the Glendale community, by the Glendale community. And I miss the original Glendale programming Channel 6 used to showcase. Glendale is a truly unique city, and I think we as a community need to take advantage and get more involved with our city's television station, Channel 6. I think we should have the channel filled with various programs that promote Glendale, and I think Glendale should challenge itself to create the best local channel in California filled with unique programs that educate and entertain our city's residents. I would like to encourage the Glendale community to become more involved with Channel 6, and I'm curious if the City Council has any suggestions about how we could go about doing this. Thank you for your time and your consideration.
Thank you. I was told by the city clerk that there's 3 more cards. I don't know, he didn't know if this was about oral communication or an agenda item. John Muir? Is this oral communication or it's about...
2 cards. One was oral communications, yes.
Okay, please come forward.
Good evening. My name's John Muir, and I'm a Glendale resident. Kind of wish my employer offered the same kind of program that you're offering the city employees here. If I had an anger management seminar I could go to, maybe I could stay home on Tuesday nights. But since I don't, with increasing frequency, our council members have adopted the practice of taking sides during the public comment period, acting as an advocate for a project, sometimes going to absurd lengths to justify their preordained decisions. The last couple of months have given us numerous examples of this practice. However, no better case in point than the discussion surrounding the proposed project located at 2644 Kennington Drive. During the lengthy council discussion period 2 weeks ago, we were treated to a cornucopia of ideas, all designed to have a house built on a wooded lot with a 71% plus slope on a windy X-fire trail. Despite protests from both neighbors and those concerned about the destruction of our indigenous trees, our council members were not deterred from their desire to see a house built on that lot. You were moving walls, kitchens, garages, driveways. You reduced apron and dedication requirements. You propose eliminating apron and dedication requirements, not just reducing them. You propose parking on one side of the street only. You propose reducing setback requirements. All of this to accommodate a house to be built because you, the council, all said you wanted to see a house built there. I have to ask why. Why do you want to see a house built there? This is despite the protests of the neighbors and the construction of the house is going to require variance. I'm confused. I'm confused. Dave Weaver thought that you might use this as an example of what can be done by granting an exception. In this case, a 5-foot setback instead of 15 feet. There are already plenty of examples of what can be done by granting exceptions to our codes and ordinances. Just look down the street at 2632 Kennington. Remember? That's the unique lot you approved for construction with a substandard lot size, slope that exceeded the ordinance standard, and also street frontage. This is just another example where the council majority focused the decision on a red herring. In this case, a cute little house, rather than apply reasoned logic to making the findings. Kennington and the adjoining street, Cascadia, are littered with new projects, approved as a result of this city's penchant for finding a way around existing ordinances to build the house. Last week, the news press published a notice of public hearing for a standards and variance setback involving 301 and 311 North Central Avenue. Dave Weaver's reduced 5-foot setback has been trumped by a developer's request for 60 setbacks on this property. 60 setbacks. This is in addition to 5 standards variances that the developer is requesting, increasing the unit density, lot coverage, floor area ratio, building height, and reducing open space requirements. Mr. Weaver, you've done enough. I think the developer community has got the message. Certainly Mr. Kahn has. This case goes to the zoning administrator on August 2nd. Stay tuned. I'm not the first person to stand here and question council decisions that appear to favor the developer community over those of established neighbors and small businessmen. I hope that you in the audience take heed that your neighborhood will be next. Maybe not next week, maybe not the week after, maybe not the month after that, but it will happen as long as this council continues to ignore the needs and concerns of Glendale residents and continues to exhibit an odd disrespect for the ordinances of this city. Thank you.
Thank you. Doug.
For the record, I voted against that house, sir.
I said majority.
Doug Conkin. Is this oral?
Yes.
Yes, thank you. Your name for record, please.
Thank you. My name is Doug Conkin. Good evening, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem, council members, and city staff. I'm a 20-year resident of Glendale, and I wanted to come to your meeting tonight to bring up one of our city's best but sorely underutilized assets. And that asset is Channel 6. I really appreciate the services Channel 6 offers, and I regularly watch the council meetings, the BZA meetings, and several other committee and board meetings, but I think something is missing. I would like to encourage you to find a way to develop and produce more community and educational programs. There are many ways that Channel 6 could serve our city with creative and informative programming. We need to educate our citizens about our city ordinances and how they are enforced. I know in our neighborhood, Kenwood, right up here between Lexington and California, that we still have a very big problem with litter. And some of our neighbors aren't cleaning up after their pets very well. A simple public service campaign of 5-minute educational spots could go a long way toward explaining to our citizens why it's important to pick up after your pet, or why it's wrong to litter. There are also lots of interesting occupations around town that people might enjoy learning about. Does anyone really know how their electric meter gets read? What happens after the reading? How is the bill prepared? And what's a kilowatt hour anyway? And I know every little boy from 5 to 50 would love to see the inside of the cab of the street sweeper and ride along with the driver through his route. A 20 or 30-minute day-in-the-life type of broadcast would give our citizens a real understanding of how our city employees do their jobs and what those jobs mean to every resident of Glendale. I understand we have a state-of-the-art production facility at Channel 6 and that it's staffed by knowledgeable people who are waiting for new projects. It seems to me that all that is needed is a segment producer-director, some new ideas, a few special concepts, and a real will to develop this resource into a truly unique service. Glendale is the premier city among the independent cities of Los Angeles County. Shouldn't it also have the premier community television station with the best programming in the county? I think it should. I think it deserves it. I think it's within your grasp. And I think with a little creative thought, sitting so close to Hollywood, we can surely come up with that. Thank you for your time, and I appreciate your attention.
Thank you, and thank you for your thoughts. Maybe you can boil down some of those ideas into a list and send it over to our PIO. That will be very helpful. You had some good ideas.
I'm sure it'll be done.
Thank you. Catherine Melly.
Are they going to speak on my project?
Is this oral communication? It's about the project. Okay.
She does.
Does she have one of those hearing devices? She does. Okay.
It's up all the way.
Yes, you can. Sorry, I didn't understand. My name is Catherine Melly, and I attend a senior class at the Pacific Park, the new building. It is perfectly gorgeous. So are the grounds, but the parking is atrocious. I have a very difficult time walking, as do most of the people in my class. And it's only street parking with only about 4 or 5 handicap parking in a small lot. Certainly there could be more parking provided. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Because I think this is the second or third.
Is that all the
case.
parking we have on Pacific, that small lot?
Well, the only parking
It goes all the way around.
very close to the building, there is parking on Kenwood, there's parking on the northerly east-west street, I forget its name. A great deal of parking over on Kenilworth. There is quite a bit of parking on the northerly street, but if you happen to be disabled or limited, it can be a distance. I know the small lot does have some handicap spaces. I think during the day, a lot of those spaces are taken up by school administrators and teachers, but we can look into the need to possibly cordon off some additional spaces in those days when they have senior classes available working with the district. Certainly during the summer. I think that school is on a regular year basis, or is it? Yeah, so during the summer, there'd probably be more parking available for classes, but we'll look into it. It's a good point.
Thank you. Okay, that was the last of the oral communication. What's next, please?
Next is adoption of ordinances, and since there are none, we move to 8A under action items, Director of Administrative Services regarding online job application software for the City of Glendale. At 8A1, motion authorizing Administrative Services, Human Resources to negotiate and enter into a contract with job apps of One Planet Web, subject to City Attorney approval, to purchase the online employment center, which includes setup, training, support, and first-year maintenance, not to exceed $65,000, an annual maintenance agreement not to exceed $20,000, plus $13,000 contingency.
Okay.
I'll move A1 with one question. If there's a second.
Yeah, let me ask Matt Doyle to come up.
There's a motion and a second, and there's a question.
Was this put out to bid, or was it just negotiated with one company? Or are they the only ones who provide the service?
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, Councilman Manukian, there are really three vendors out there that provide this type of online application service that specialize in government, public sector type application systems, and that includes the whole testing process, the things that are common to civil service agencies, where you do have to have constant tracking, record keeping of the applicant from start to finish, with multiple tests and interview panels and things like that. There are a lot of companies out there that will do simply an online application system, but really only three that we're aware of that focus on the special needs of public sector civil service agencies. We did an extensive study within both human resources and the IT department, looking at all these companies, and we eliminated one almost immediately because it just wasn't prepared. The product they had wasn't ready yet, and we spent several months evaluating the remaining two through site visits, reference calls, and such. And we've settled essentially on this one company, Job Apps, which best meets our needs.
Okay. And in terms of pricing, is
the one other viable option was cheaper. It had a price tag of approximately $35,000 to $40,000. However, this one, again, best meets our needs, and we've gotten a lot of really good feedback on it.
okay.
Mr. Starbird.
Just another comment. Reference was made earlier to individuals' ability to access City Hall. This is a way in which people could access our HR system without even coming into City Hall. In terms of making it available, it's a great resource for individuals who, while they have difficulty getting in or because of distances, will now be able to access City Hall through our website and actually do job applications and check on status.
Yes, yes.
But currently, all of our jobs are listed on the website.
Mm-hmm.
And we also advertise on Channel 21.
But for example, if you want to file an application, you have to
This
come
would
into City
allow
Hall.
you to do
Yeah, this
that.
would allow you to file an application online and check on its status online.
Because the earlier speaker said we don't know what kind of jobs do you have, but my understanding is
Those
we've
are
been,
posted
we've
online.
been posting this for many, many years.
We've been doing that for many years.
Right.
And I do have to say that it's about time. I think this is great. It's about time that we start providing some of these services. I don't see why we can't on a lot of the services that we provide. Including we're doing some permit fees and stuff
Right.
on the
Right,
internet. So.
exactly.
A couple
Yeah.
of weeks ago. Okay, there's a motion and a second. Roll call, please. Thank you, Matt.
Council members Manukian,
Yes.
Najarian,
Yes.
Quintero,
Yes.
Mayor Weaver, Mayor Pro Tem Yusefian.
Aye. Next item, please.
At 8B is Director of Administrative Services regarding Glendale Community College, GCC, request for an interest-free loan of $1.5 million to pay the college's unfunded cost of the GCC new parking garage project, including a facade upgrade on the new parking structure. At 8B1, motion denying the request for a loan. At 8B2, motion approving the request for a loan, subject to repayment terms and conditions.
Okay, and with that, I'll go to Mr. Starbird.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, let me at least start this off by some comments, and then Ron Allers, representing Administrative Services, can add if he needs to. You received an original request in writing from Glendale Community College for a request for an interest-free loan of $1.5 million to help supplement the cost of the construction of the college's new main parking facility and the cost of the associated road improvements on East Mountain. This report was prepared in that context and is a recommendation from the staff's perspective to not approve the loan, but that if the City Council were so inclined to give a loan to the college, that it bear an interest rate as well as have some source of security for repayment, much in the same way that you gave a loan of tax increment revenues to the Glendale Unified School District for the new field at Glendale High School. Mr. Franz shared that initial draft of the staff report before placing on the agenda with the staff at GCC, and that resulted in the second letter to you from Glendale Community College, Mr. Surratt, that indicated that under the, the guidelines, the constraints recommended by staff, if indeed the loan were to carry an interest rate, that they would turn to other means of financing, and as a result indicate that they were no longer interested in the loan. I continue to place the matter on the agenda, however, because the item really hasn't been brought to closure, which is whether or not the council would extend to the college staff an interest-free loan. I suspect if you did, the college would still want to take advantage of it. Mr. Surratt was responding to the draft report that Mr. Franz delivered to him. So I felt at that point that we really should continue to proceed to place the matter on the agenda and receive council directions whether or not you would, under the circumstances requested in their first letter, grant them a loan, and if so, whether you would want that to be interest-free and with or without security. That's how this matter comes to you.
Okay, any questions? Mr. Quintero.
Yeah, how much of the money is going to actually build the structure, and how much is for the facade? It's my understanding that the structure is actually funded. Is that correct?
I understand they're proceeding with the structure. It's under construction. Their original letter indicated that they could provide an improved facade on the structure, but I think they also, in our original discussions with Dr. Davitt, referenced the cost of the street. I think the original letter referenced cost of the street. But their first pass at us was that they could put a much improved facade on the parking structure if they had this funding. I don't know what that status is, frankly. I don't know if they've decided to proceed with the enhanced facade, whether the enhanced facade still depends on some form of a loan. The sense I have from the second letter is that if indeed it bears interest, then they'd look to other financing, which implies they'd still be proceeding with the enhanced facade, but I really don't know. I don't think we know, do we, Ron? Have we had any feedback from them?
My understanding was originally they went to a different facade because the cost was over $300,000, and then later on they found, because they changed the facade, made it much more, modern, and also they eliminated the elevator. Later on, it was found that they needed to have the elevator.
Mm-hmm.
So consequently, the difference between the old facade, which was more in keeping with the college's design, and the new facade, which is basically doesn't go with anything in the college, was about $180,000. I think this is more about the widening of the street more than anything else. And so one question I have from Mr. Franz, if he's here, or Mr. Aller, where do you bring this money? I mean, when we went through the budget hearing, we were cutting $5,000, $3,000, $4,000 from some projects. So where do you all of a sudden find $1.5 million?
Mr. Mayor, let me respond to that because that's the policy question for you, the council. Our recommendation is the loan not be funded. That if the council desires it to be funded, because in effect a loan isn't treated like an expenditure on our books. A loan is really a change from an asset, which would be your cash or your investments, to a different kind of an investment, so to speak, which would be the loan. But it does take resources to fund the loan. If the council were inclined to grant a loan, our recommendation would be that it be from the general fund reserve, not from your available resources in the CIP, because that would take away from other projects that we'd have planned. In that fashion, the general fund would still show a reserve at the same level you have it, but part of that reserve would be an asset, which would be the loan receivable from the college. That's why we've recommended that the interest rate, in the same way you did with the GSD, float with the interest that we earn on our general city portfolio, so the loan would be essentially like a long-term investment on which you'd be earning a rate equivalent to your city portfolio rate. That's also why we recommended that there be some form of security, and two different opportunities have been identified in the staff report, one of which is future potential pass-through to the college from the San Fernando corridor, or actually from the Central Project area.
Central Project.
In the same way you secured that with a GOSD loan. That amount is not nearly as much as the GUSD generates, so it wouldn't give you complete security. The second fallback security would be I'll call it a second call on their parking meter revenues, which are currently dedicated for bond repayment. But we think there could be some additional revenues there that could serve as security to close the gap.
What's the pass-through?
I don't recall the amount. Do you, Ron?
Yeah, the pass-through is in the council report. It is a total of $580,000 in nominal dollars, or net present value of a little over $400,000.
That's over the 15-year term.
So
Over
that
15
would,
years.
that would leave about
Would
$1
secure,
million.
yeah, would secure about a third. Would
and
secure
you're
about a
going
third.
to secure that through their parking.
Right, and the next page would show their cash flow from the parking fees over the same 15-year period.
Okay. Okay. Mr. Najarian.
Well, I know the college had initially asked for this quite some time ago. A couple things have changed. As I understand it, the new fiscal year budget has been somewhat more generous to the community colleges and to Glendale College in particular. They're not stretched as tight as they were before. That being said, as I understand, the reason for this loan is to help assist in widening Mountain Street, which is a requirement that we have placed upon them based on proper and appropriate traffic engineering studies. The college's improvements are really going to help a large part of the city, in particular that intersection down at Mountain and Verdugo, which is, if not the most busiest intersection. It's got to rank number 2, maybe number 3 behind the Brand interchange with the 134. So in a sense, what's happening is that the students are going to be coming off the freeway, hopefully, and dropping right down into that large parking structure. They're not going to be circling the college, bothering the folks through the Woodlands area or through Mountain Street. And we've heard from the folks on Mountain Street several times, in case anyone has forgotten their vociferous objection to college students using Mountain as a thoroughfare to get to the college and then to park in front of their homes and whatnot. And despite the last letter that we've received from Larry Surratt saying, we really don't want this loan, I believe it would be a good gesture towards bridge building with the college should we extend them the loan of 1.5 with the security as indicated in the staff report at the rate, the floating rate of our rate of return on our investment portfolio. The city, this is something that we need to work together. We've done it with the school district, and it's really a benefit for the entire community. And hopefully they won't default on the loan.
Mr. Quintero.
Yeah, I agree. I'm for the loan if it's at a reasonable rate, if we can help the college out. But interest-free is pretty much out of the question.
Okay. Motion?
I'll move.
That would be B2, 8B2.
Okay, I'll move 8.
Which incorporates both the floating interest rate as well as the security.
I'll second it.
There is a motion and a second. Roll call.
Council members Manukian,
Yes.
Najarian,
Yes.
Quintero,
Yes.
Mayor Weaver, Mayor Pro Tem Yusefian.
Aye. Next item, please.
Next item at 8C is Director of Planning regarding request for rezoning of the 700 block of Howard Street. At 8C1, motion directing staff to initiate rezoning from R1250 to R2250. At 8C2, motion directing staff to report on traffic conditions and possible traffic improvements in the area known as Monterey Road and Howard Street.
Mr. Yusefian, I might, on the previous item, just a note, I'll be meeting with Dr. Levy at 8:30 tomorrow morning, and we'll pass on to her your action this evening.
Thank you. Before I get to the item, what I'm going to do is, if there's anybody else who would like to turn in their cards about this item, please do so. I am going to stop accepting cards as soon as staff is finished presenting their case. So just remember that. As you come up to speak, please make sure that you are very concise about your issues. It will be very helpful if you're not repetitious. If you're against it, say I'm against it. So this way we can move on with the cards. At this time, I'll go with staff.
Okay, to our Director of Planning, Elaine.
Thank you. Council, this is an item in response to a petition and a number of speakers that came to council on May 16th of this year. Kathy Duarte is the planner who wrote the report, and she's going to do a brief PowerPoint for you. I also am going to distribute to you, in addition to the PowerPoint you got yesterday afternoon, I'm going to give you some additional pictures that she's going to include in the PowerPoint that she just took today. Thank you.
Could you tell me how this got on the agenda? Did council ask to put this on the agenda?
Yes, when the matter was at council and the oral communications, I believe Council Member Quintero asked the city manager how we would get this on the council, and the city manager, I think, responded something like,
That's good.
we would report.
I just want to know.
Yeah,
Thank you.
let me clarify. We actually went back and watched the tape of May 16, and Mr. Quintero had asked whether there was going to be appropriate follow-up to the oral communications, the gentleman who spoke then. I made a comment about there's a process for residents to initiate a zone change. Mr. Howard indicated that there was a process by which the City Council could initiate the zone change. Mr. Quintero had in his earlier comment said it seemed to him there needed to be a report on this. Mr. Howard confirmed indeed in order for the Council to consider this, there would need to be a report and it be agendized. With that, I took that as a request to bring that report back to you and place the matter on the agenda. So because of the nature of the conversation, Mr. Quintero had been interrupted a bit, but it seemed pretty clear from the tape that that had been the intent, was to bring this matter back to you.
Okay. Ms. Duarte? PowerPoint presentation?
Yes.
All right.
Mayor Pro Tem Yusefian and council members, before I begin, just like to note that the PowerPoint presentation you received yesterday may be a little out of order because of the new photos.
Okay, and could you speak a little bit louder? We do have a
I will
person here who's hearing
try.
impaired, and
Okay.
maybe you can raise the volume, please. Thank you.
Staff is recommending that council direct staff to report on traffic improvements for this area, which is the 700 block of Howard Street, per the zoning request of the neighborhood. The goal of the traffic study would be to improve the quality of life for the residents in this neighborhood. The objectives would be to study possible traffic improvements regarding traffic congestion in the area, especially on Monterey Road, pedestrian safety, maintain on-street parking, and adequate emergency access. Today's situation. Currently, there's a proposal for a new 26-unit condominium project over, it's 3 stories over subterranean parking, 60 parking spaces, which is to be located at 713 through 725 North Howard Street. This is on the southwest corner of Monterey Road and Howard Street. There are currently 3 existing single-family homes at that location on 3 separate lots. The 3 lots would be combined into 1 lot for this project. And because the lot frontage is over 90 feet, they are allowed a greater density rather than the R1250 then becomes R1000. So they would be allowed 27 units. And they are proposing 26 units. The residents did appear at the Design Review Board meetings and were opposed to this project at that time. And residents then at the May 16th, 2006 City Council meeting requested a zone change for this area from R1250 to R2250. And we just noted Councilman Quintero requested staff to report on this issue. It's kind of hard to reach, but we're looking south at this area. The area outlined in blue is where the proposed, this area, oh, okay. Okay, the area outlined in blue is where the proposed project is to be located. You can see there are the 3 existing one-unit properties, and then there are 2 units located at the south end. We have 6 units here, 1 unit here, 1 unit here, and then 10 units on this end. The outline...
Are those 2 different buildings, the ones on the top left-hand corner?
No.
It's one
It's
building?
one property, yeah, they're 5 units each.
And, oh, okay.
Yeah. So the outline area in red shows the area that the residents are requesting to be rezoned. And for further clarification, the property is located south of Monterey Road, in between the wash here and then the 134 freeway here. And we had to paste a couple of the pictometry aero photos together, so some of the streets may be a little off.
Could you go back to that? Behind those projects, there is no single-family residential, correct? I see an 8-unit, 5-unit,
Correct.
5-unit, 8-unit, 8-unit.
Correct.
Okay.
It's abutting a multifamily zoned
Building
area.
61, those are the accurate dates?
According to the
1961,
LA County Assessment.
1980, 1980, 1963, and 1990.
Correct, according to the LA County Assessors.
Okay.
So on a similar property behind it is 26 units, 8, 8, and 10, right?
Where are you?
Yeah.
To the right,
Yeah,
Oh, I see.
there's
Right.
8, 8, and 5,
10.
5, that's 26.
right, same density.
Right.
And Mayor Pro Tem, there's a 3-story building across the road on Isabel, which I'm going to point out too.
Right here.
How many units there?
I don't know.
I think it's in the report. I could check that for
Okay.
you.
All right, please go on.
I think it's on the other side. And as you can see here, on this edge of the proposed zone change, it abuts single-family zone over here.
Oh, but that's not the area they want to change the zone.
No, it's just abutting single-family.
Okay.
And then the proposed project is over here with the blue.
And all of that is single family? The one on the left?
Correct. This is zoned R1 and has been.
And Mayor Pro Tem, I checked the building across the road. We only gave data for the west side of the street, not the east side, so I'm not sure about the number of units in that building. But the reason I noted it's a 3-story building is because one of the comments raised was the concern about this new proposal being 3 stories and that nothing around it was 3 stories.
Okay.
How did we get here? Prior to 1986, the proposed properties for rezoning were zoned R4, which is 58 dwelling units per acre. And then in 1986, when the city did the citywide rezoning project or zoning consistency plan, these properties were rezoned to R750, which was equivalent to the R4. And then in 1989, when there was a citywide rezoning as well, these properties were downzoned to R1250, or 27 to 35 dwelling units per acre.
Were the R1s in 1985 still R1, or were they also R4, then they got downzoned to R1? You know that?
They were R4 before that.
So the single family used to be R4.
The single family adjacent to this zone, they were always R1.
Oh, they were always R1. So that
On
didn't-
Geneva?
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, R1.
Okay.
And they went from R1 to 750, R750?
No, that was already R750.
These are just for the properties proposed to be rezoned, and they have always been multifamily. They were first R4, and then 750, which is equivalent, and then they were downzoned to R1250, and they are now currently 1250.
Mr. Mnuchin, Mr. Yusefian's reference was to the houses over on
Geneva.
Right.
And these densities reflect what an individual lot would be at if it were less than 90 feet in width. When they're combined and become more than 90 feet in width, that's where you get the provision for the R1000 in the 1250 zone. It's considered a bonus, per se, for larger lots.
As a result, there have been multifamily dwelling units developed in this area, and sometimes with insufficient parking, inadequate sidewalks, and the number of units exceed current zoning in some cases.
Okay, before you go there, on that issue, with the exception of 1967, because I can understand the 1967 one, do the rest of them, the one in 1990, meet the new zoning code? So it had to have its proper parking. The ones that were built in 1980, they have probably parking, but not 2 per unit. They had 1.75.
Which ones are we referring, what are we referring to?
The ones on the other side, because she says there were units that were built.
Which other side?
That they were.
He's looking at the units, at the year they were built.
On the right?
Right. See, the one on
Talking about-
1990, the 8 unit, that
Those-
has the current standard.
They should, yes.
Parking-wise.
Mhm.
The 8 unit from 1963, I don't know what it was at that point. That probably doesn't have
I
it.
can answer that for you.
Okay.
The ones in.
Mr. Mayor, she has to come to the microphone.
Okay,
and-
if you could come to the mic. What do you have in the 1963? How many
Well,
units?
the units that were built in 1960 were 8 units and only 6 parking places.
Okay, so they
And
had
we're now
6.
living with that very bad situation.
Okay.
And that's Isabel Street.
So the
There you
sixth, so the one that were built in 1963 and 1961, they have 6 parking each.
Yes, instead of
Okay.
8.
Okay. And how about the ones that are built in 1980? How many parking they have? They're
They
5
have-
units?
Some of them have 8, only 8, 1 per parking.
Yeah, because it was 1.75.
Yeah, before that, it was only 8 units and 6 parking places.
Okay, thank you. Okay, continue.
And here's just another illustration of the zoning history. You can, as we explained. Yeah.
I wish we get the directions consistent.
Yeah.
Well,
So you have to flip
the
that.
reason the reason for this is opposite of the rest is because we wanted to be able to show the sidewalk area from the air, so you could see some of the over in this area here. We wanted to be able to show that better than if we had it looking north. You probably wouldn't be able to see that.
Oh, I see.
And this was done after the others, so I apologize. So that's the previous zoning history as we're talking. It was all, this area on Geneva was always R1. And then this entire area here up to North Isabel was always multifamily. As I said, it was R4, 750, and then R1250, which includes this area proposed to be rezoned.
And how far do we go to
the west?
before we hit the CBD zone?
I'm not quite sure. This area, I believe, right across Isabel is also the same.
2 blocks?
Quite a ways.
Well, we get over
I think
to
it's-
Maryland before we get CBD, and I think it's all 1250.
I believe-
I'll just double check that, but that's my recollection.
4 blocks.
And here we just have a few of the site photos from street level at the corner of Howard and Monterey here. These, and then going south, these are the 3 properties proposed to be demolished for the new 26-unit condo. And then this would be the property at the end of the street on that side, on the west side. And then this is across the street on Howard, on the east side, going across, or going south. And
It's
this
actually
is,
Louise, because Maryland doesn't cut up north of the highway. So it's from Weeds all the way across 1250.
And so what is that, 2 blocks?
Well, from here, it's Howard, Isabel, Jackson, Kenwood, Louise.
Okay. Thank you.
And here we have a few pictures of Monterey Road, looking west here and then looking east here. And you can see that the sidewalks are not constructed here.
Oh, so this doesn't even have a sidewalk?
Correct.
Was there an easement there for a sidewalk before?
Yeah, it is city property, and the proposed
Where
project,
does the city property end currently?
I believe it's a 3-foot area.
That's it?
No,
No?
I think the city only has a foot and a half.
We asked the city engineer to do a preliminary review of this.
Ask her to.
And they haven't really done any detailed work.
Okay.
According to the city maps, I believe it's 3 feet, the engineering maps.
Okay.
Maybe the wall was not constructed that way, but. So the available options are 1, no action, keeping the existing R1215 zoning. 2, initiate rezoning for both sides of the 700 block of Howard to R2250. And 3, report on possible traffic improvements. And
You
that,
have a picture of the project?
I have plans we could
What
put
it
up.
looks like?
What's that got to do with the zone?
Well-
Mayor Pro Tem, just a second. I'm one of the speakers, and I do have a photograph. If you'd like to see it, I'm happy to share it. Or
Okay, thank you, thank you. I just thought if they didn't have it on the power plan.
And
Okay.
Mayor, we distributed you a revised table. We had changed the format at the last minute. In doing that, the sums were not quite correct. So the version you got yesterday was the correct version. Also would like to bring to your attention that I asked the building staff the status of the development application for the 26 units. There is an application for grading permit. It is not issued yet, but it is in process.
Did it get approved through design review?
It has been approved through design review.
Does it have its environmental?
Yes, it has its environmental approval.
Okay. Is this, are you done?
That's it for me, yeah.
Any
If you
questions
have-
from staff? Okay.
If you'd like, we could hang up the plan behind the screen if you'd
Yeah,
like.
if you could raise
We'll do
that up
that
and-
while you start
Actually, I
hearing
do
the
have a
speakers.
Mr.
If it were to be reduced to 2250, how many units would be built?
The potential would be reduced by 27 units.
But in that one project,
Oh, that one project?
it would go to 15 from 27.
So 15 for this particular project.
Yes.
But overall, the reduction would be
27 units.
27.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'm going to go to oral communication. To the people, to the public. Do you have any other questions? No. All right.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Carol Collin. Re- Please give your name.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, Carol Coolin,
Okay.
and I live on in 700 block at North Howard.
Okay.
And I do approve of the down zoning to 2250. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor Pro Tem, before you move on, a quick question on the last question Mr. Quintero asked about the number of units that would be permitted under 2250. Elaine, is that with or without the bonus for the 90-foot front? Because it would actually go to the 90-foot frontage would take it to R1250 or what would be the density with the bonus?
I'll take it to probably all 16.
Just to make sure we've given you the correct answer, Mr. Quintero.
All right.
This one is with the bonus,
it is
isn't
with the bonus.
It is with the bonus, and I'm just going to...
The 15 does include the bonus?
Yes, but I'm going to tell you what the bonus becomes.
Suzanne Roberts.
It's, it becomes 1,800, R1,800 with the bonus.
Mm-hmm. 15.
Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem.
Your name
council
for the record,
members.
please.
My name is Susan Roberts, and I would like to implore you to downzone the 700 block of Howard from R 1250 to R 2250. The R 1250 is more appropriate to the downtown area. What you're doing here is you're taking out 3 single-family homes and putting in 26 units. There is no 3-story apartment building on Howard as it is now. This project will overshadow all of the other smaller apartment buildings, and I feel that it is inappropriate, this density increase. And it also seems to me that if we had 80% of the Glendale residents in here begging you to downzone, it wouldn't make a bit of difference. It seems to me that you will not be satisfied until we're packed in here like a can of sardines. Thank you.
Thank you. Lori Collins.
Good evening, gentlemen. My name is Lori Collins, and I reside nearby this project. I support my neighbor's request to rezone the property. My neighbors are not a mob. They are Glendale residents who are simply trying to preserve their quality of life. They are asking the council to change the zoning to a density appropriate to the neighborhood. They are asking the city council to consider their health, general welfare, and safety by considering rezoning the property. Short-term developer profits appear to be the guiding principle of this council. The long-term viability and general welfare of the city, which depends upon smart growth, should be your guiding principle, and neither should be sacrificed for a quick return on investment. What this council is ignoring is the cumulative impacts of each of the projects it approves. This project is not being built in a vacuum, and it will not be built in a vacuum. All of the newer higher density projects must be considered as a whole if we do not want to live in a city with gridlock, overtaxed city services, and negatively impact the daily lives of our residents, which should be important to this council. Please listen to your constituents.
Thank you. Catherine Melly.
Hi, my name is Catherine Melly, and I reside at 725 North Isabel. I've been there 43 years. I own an 8-unit apartment building. Unfortunately, in the 60s, we made the mistake of building apartments without suitable parking and overbuilding, and I hope we don't continue this practice.
Ma'am, I have a question. You live on 725 Howard?
North Isabel.
Oh, on Isabel.
Yes, I do.
Thank you.
And we only have 1.5 foot that the city owns there. That's why we do not have a sidewalk.
And if the project had proper parking and wide sidewalks, you still will have an objection to it?
I would have an objection to the great number of automobiles that would be going in and out of there. It's impossible to get in and out of those 2 cul-de-sacs. This evening when I came here at 6 o'clock, I waited 5 minutes to try to break through traffic to leave Isabel.
Thank you. Charles Saldana. Okay. Zara Gazarian. Thank you.
What'd she say?
She supports downzoning. Margaret Tahamon.
Hammond.
Margaret Hammond. Margaret, what are you doing to me?
What was your name again? Do we know you?
State your name.
Your D's are starting to look like O's, Margaret.
Oh, I know. I was doing that in a hurry.
I know you're finished taking your PhDs, so
Right.
that's what's happening.
Well, I thought since you were there, I'd better print it so you could read it easier.
Yeah, well,
Didn't work.
do a
All
better
right.
job on the D's.
My name is Margaret Hammond, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem and members of the council. I am, of course, against any overbuilding. I think the 2250 would be very good for that area. And while I don't live there, I live in the densest part of the city of Glendale. And I think Mr. Manukian said perhaps the greatest density in a city in America. So I am, no, you didn't say that? Okay, I'll have to find out what you did say
I
then.
will tell you what.
And well, that's what I heard at one point. And so what I'm saying is anything that adds to the density, problems with parking, affects the quality of life. And I can tell you from experience of where I live, what it changed from when I first came to what happened to it in 1980 in my area, with apartments being built everywhere, without enough parking, what the streets are like now for trying to find parking, and so forth, that I definitely think 2250 is more than adequate for that area, with it being cul-de-sac and so forth, to affect the quality of life for the people in surrounding area streets. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Dana Hall? Your name for the record, please.
My name is Dana Hall, and I'm speaking in favor of the downzoning. I represent the Shadow Ridge Homeowners Association, and we have been opposing this from the beginning. Although, I want to clarify this, that we have never wanted to kill this project, only to...
Could you explain where Shadow Ridge is? I don't know the name.
Those two buildings you saw on the upper left-hand side.
Oh, the condominium project across
Yeah.
the street. Okay.
Okay. We have never wanted to kill this project. We've only asked that it be downsized to make it compatible with the neighborhood. We turned in a letter with about 250 signatures supporting our position. We don't want this stopped. We just wanted it downzoned. When last December, when it went to the Design Review Board, they agreed with us. They told them to come back. One of the conditions that they put on there was to come back and reduce the number of units. When it did come back later on, it had the same number of units, the same number of square footage. They didn't change that. And lo and behold, it was approved 5-0. Like I said, we are all residents there that have been expressing and exercising our rights as citizens. We are constituents of this board here. Yesterday, in the Glendale News Press, there was an article regarding this hearing coming up for zoning. Mr. Yusefian compared us to a lynch mob. I'm a little upset about that. We are citizens exercising our legal rights. Mr. Yusefian, the Oxford Dictionary defines a mob as a disorderly crowd, rabble, or a derogatory term for the populace. And that's what I feel is going on here, that you have an arrogant attitude towards the people here. I'm not the first one tonight to suggest that this council and the city is pro-developer. I'm just reaffirming that. We have exercised in an orderly fashion. We have done everything, as far as I know, appropriately. We're asking that the property be downzoned, and I think, Mr. Yusefian, you owe an apology to everybody who signed that letter.
And thank you very much. I think what happened is I remember what I said, and I think my words were taken out of context, and that's not what I said.
I called the reporter to verify
Yes.
that that's what you said,
Yes.
and that's what she told me.
Well, I will talk to the reporter also.
Mr. Mayor Pro Tem,
Yes.
if I can, a quick
Yes.
question. Mr. Hall,
Yes.
I'm curious why the decision of the DRB wasn't appealed.
I didn't know that it could be.
Okay. Because we've heard from several of the residents there's not a concern about necessarily about the project, about its design. So I was curious why the DRB's decision wasn't appealed.
When we went to the meeting, the first meeting, they agreed with us and said it needed to be, the number of units needed to be reduced. It came up in the next meeting, and boom, 5-0, it was approved.
Okay.
I'd like to have some clarification, because here it says the proposed project was heard again and approved by a 3-2 vote.
What
And
page
then
is that
later
from?
on, it says on page 6 in the report,
Staff report.
Then later on, it says they approved the environmental impact report 5-0, but the project itself was 3-2.
I understand that was taken right from the decision. Kathy prepared it with the decision. There may have been a confusion because the vote first taken is on the environmental, and perhaps people in the audience felt that was the approval of the project. And it's right
so
here,
the
I'm
project
looking
was
at it, it is
3-2.
3-2 on the
Okay.
project.
Okay. Quick question for Ms. Wilkerson. The Shadow Ridge was a 10-unit building. Is that what the gentleman was explaining?
Yes, it's, I think, 714 North Howard.
And when was that built?
We'd have,
I don't know. Was that 82 or something?
1980s,
we're going to check here for you.
And what was the zoning when that was built?
1250.
It would have been, if it was built in 1980, and someone in the audience said it was, when was the Shadow Ridge? 1982?
So that would be R4.
82 would have been R4.
R750.
Yes.
Mhm.
And it is actually built at just the R1250 standards today. And the building directly across the road, I think, is one over today's permitted density because it was built under the old zoning
And
as
if
well.
that building had to conform to a proposed R2250, how many units would be permitted?
714 would only have 6 units allowed under 2250 instead of the 10 that exist.
Okay, thank you.
That's the Shadow Ridge.
Thank you.
John Muir.
Yeah, the article, John, you're a Glendale resident. The article in the Glendale News Press has been cited a couple of times here, and I'm just curious, maybe you were misquoted again, Mr. Yusefian, but I'm curious as to where you gained your information when you made the statement that residents only want the area rezoned to kill the condominium project. When I went in on the Glendale city site and pulled down the information on this project, there were a lot of documents there. I think there were 60 pages. But I didn't see anything there at all that supported your statement. So I'm just curious as to where your information came from. It's obvious that prior to this meeting, you had already made up your decision on how you were going to address this. And I'm not sure that that's really in the interest when we talk about having a public comment period. And if, in fact, our elected representatives have not only already made up their mind, but have communicated that to the public through the media. Thank you.
Thank you. Roseanne Berchikian.
Hi.
Your
My name
for
is
the record, please.
Yes. My name is Roseanne Berjikian, and I'm the owner of 720 North Isabel Street, number 4. So, first I would like to say that all our efforts regarding this project, it took almost 8 months, and it was based on the information that Mr. Manukian gave during his interview on Haranian's live show, that he told the public that if you have 75% of the population living in that area, you can ask for change. And the second was based on the Mr. Nigerian's interview on the same show, that every other call that he receives is regarding the traffic and parking spaces, like the people have these difficulties. Now I would like to highlight some of the points contained in this report. When we talked with Mrs. Cathy Duarte, and we gave her all this documentation, facts, and pictures, and I give all this information to you too, like I bring letters to your offices. So she promised us that her report is going to be non-partisan. and the report is going to reflect all the points from our side too. But unfortunately, from the report, we find out that most of the material was out of the report. So now, first fact that we going to say is the lot size that provided by this number that provided by developer. The numbers that you can see in the report, like page 3, it says like all the numbers take from assessor, LA County Assessor Office. So we did. We took the numbers from the same source. Now these numbers, 28,306 square feet. There is no source that back up this number. Numbers we got from this assessor's office. It's like these 3 properties have one 11,626, the second one 7,200, and third one 7,200, which give us total of 26,026 square feet. Now, if you take this 9-foot dedication, it's gonna be 24,768, which leaves us with a shortage of 2,244. So.
Thank you.
I need 2 more minutes.
Thank you. 3 minutes. Thank you. Staff, did you guys check to see what the number was? I mean, did you guys check to see if the square footage was?
Need to come to the microphone.
Yes, I re-verified the information with the case planner that was working on the design review board project.
She just gave some numbers, and I added those numbers, and they do not add up to 28,000. What was your numbers that you checked for those lots?
Well, I don't have the, because it's all summed up here,
Okay.
but the 27,012 with the dedication for that project area,
Okay.
we verified as being accurate.
Basically, what I have in here, it says the project site has an existing area of 28,306 square feet, approximately a 140 by 200. Okay? And then after the dedication is done, it will end up having 27,012 square feet. So my question is, how did you get there? And I have a property profile report that shows 11,626, 7,200, and 7,200. And they do not add up.
Mr. Mayor Pro Tem, sorry. The data that Kathy is referring to is right off of the project summary by the applicant. They are given the responsibility to survey the property. As you know, the county assessment data is not reliable sufficiently for the purpose of doing development review, so we require that they submit additional data. In the material I have here, I can see it barely, but I can see it. It shows the lot area before dedication is 28,306, which is the number in the report, and the lot area is also shown for the individual lots. It's very small, but I can see it barely. In addition, I can assure you that this will be checked through at plan check in full detail.
Well, I think at 26,000 square feet, after you take the dedication out, it will probably be down to about 24. There's going to be a difference in number of units.
But the
We'll knock off at
26,000
least
is
2
the
or
county
3
assessor
units.
number? Is that the county assessor number?
Well, no, the county assessor number on one parcel is 11,626. On the next one is 7,200. On the next one is 7,200.
Well, as I'm saying, that we find the county assessor data is not reliable sufficiently for review of development, and we asked the developers to provide us a survey, and the information they provide us is, in this case, 28,000 square feet.
So we have actually a licensed surveyor that went out there and surveyed the property?
Well, I'm just, it's hard to tell from the
leave it up to the
data I
applicant.
have here,
Yeah.
but
Oh.
it shows that the architect's a licensed architect, and it has survey information, which would suggest to me that it has been surveyed.
I have a question for the speaker. I didn't understand where you lived. You live behind the project, in other words, to the west?
East
No, to the east.
Isabel. East Isabel.
To the west.
Yeah, you live to the west of the project.
It's back. No, it's 5.
What is your street address?
720 North Isabel.
If
They're condos, like townhouse does condos.
So you're looking for a less dense project, I assume?
Yes. Can I add one more quick thing? Even though with these numbers, right now, the area is overbuilt right now. Like, if you look at this Isabel Street, 712 to 724, these buildings on the size, lot size of 27,784, and with the total of 26 units. But with this 4 units is overbuilt right now. But this project has 24,768 square feet, and they are asking to build 26 units. With right now is like 6 units more than it should be.
Okay, thank you.
How much parking do you have on your building, Ms. Rajikian?
It's a 2-space parking attached garage.
And when was your building built?
82 or 80,
Yeah.
82, yeah.
So each unit has 2 parking.
Yeah,
Right.
it's like three levels.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Hamak position, what? Perchikian. Pardon? Okay. Thank you for your brevity. Here's for downzoning. Aslanyan Rima? Asaturian Rima? Or Rima Asaturian?
She can, we can translate.
Okay, she's for,
Ms. Mayor.
okay, she's,
Yeah.
okay, thank you.
Yeah.
She's for downzoning. Next, Barry Allen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem, Council staff. I'm Barry Allen with Vanguard, and it's got to be rough being a city councilman here in Glendale.
You can have it anytime.
And it's a matter of balancing, right? It's a balancing act. The demands of the builders and developers on one side and the needs of the community on the other. Which one gets it? When we put the balls in the air, which one is going to come up? I think it all boils down to the economics. As we change zoning and we put in more density, there's more people, more congestion, and of course it's just a microcosm. Each of these developments is its own microcosm. We could look at all of the things that are happening in the downtown area with all the buildings going up and all the particular needs are happening. But the real thing is money. Each of these buildings will bring in more money in the city. And just a little bit ago, we heard the discussion on money and how we're looking for money in all sorts of places to fund an aquatic center, to do all sorts of things that we'd like to. But never once did it come out that the city is saying, let's look where we can cut expenses. Never come out. It's not even on the horizon. Sure, we'll change the budget, we'll do this, we'll do that. But this particular project, that developer is going to be spending money here. That developer is going to be doing a number of things here. And I think we're not looking at the quality of life that's existing today for the people that are there, which isn't the best. And certainly, this isn't going to make it any better if we allow to increase the density and allow more development and demolish the few homes that are in that area. I think the council has a serious balancing issue to look at, and it's a very serious one. The developers are here, and the public is here, the people that live there, the people that vote for you. I'm Barry Allen with Vanguard, and hope that you certainly consider this. Thank you.
Thank you. Tom McHale. Name for the record.
Mr. Mayor, City Council members, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Tom McHale, and I live on Howard Street. I've lived there for 33 years, and I plan to continue living there.
Which house
I'm
do you
on
live in?
720. I'm in favor of the project of 26 units being built. It would not only enhance the neighborhood, it would give more living space for more residents. The three houses on that street right now, across from where I live, are decrepit and old, were built in the 1920s, and no improvements have been made on them. The house on the corner, 725, is a disgrace to the block. You should take a look at it someday if you're driving by. So I urge you to consider construction and development of this project. Thank you.
I have a couple of questions from you. Majority of the people are opposing this project and asking for downzoning because of the difficulty they have getting out of that cul-de-sac. What's your experience? I don't live there. You have lived there for many years.
Thank you. I go out of there every morning, several times a day. It's not a problem. In view of the traffic that is in the Los Angeles area, it's routine. You have to learn to deal with it, and it's not a problem, in my opinion.
When you have problem, when do you have the problem? Is it during the rush hour?
I don't have a problem.
Okay. All right.
It's not a
Okay,
problem.
thank you, please.
What is the problem for waiting a minute? Where are you going? You're only going to the next stoplight. You have to flow with the traffic. And if you don't want to go left off Howard Street, turn right, sir. Go with the flow.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any questions?
you.
No. Vahe Panosian?
Good evening, Mayor, Honorable Councilman, and staff. My name is Dr. Vahe Panosian. I would like to take this opportunity to briefly introduce ourselves. My wife, Nancy, whom you will meet shortly, and I are the proud owners of the proposed construction at 713 to 725 North Howard Street. This is a completely code-compliant project, which has filed and asked for no variances. It has over 60 parking spaces, 8 of which are for guests. Okay. I have been a resident of Glendale for over 25 years. My family and I are a product of the public school system here, and we're proud to call Glendale our home. We believe that the proposed construction at 713 to 725 North Howard Street is a welcomed and beautiful addition to the community. In fact, as an answer to you, Councilman Quintero, all 5 of the DRB commissioners felt the same. While 2 of the 5 voted in favor of this project without any modifications, 3 of the 5 voted in favor of this project with a small modification in terms of the trash bin and in terms of the tile work from the street. The surveyor that you've addressed is actually a licensed surveyor in the state of California. He has surveyed all points on the properties, all 3 properties separately, and has come up with the number. We have no control over that. As Ms. Wilkerson has informed you, this will be addressed and confirmed under plan check. The request for the rezoning of 700 block of Howard Street is, as you can see, a rather transparent ploy to derail our individual project, one which wastes valuable city resources and funds. As such, we hope you see through these efforts and permit us to move forward. We thank you for your valued time and effort in this matter.
Thank you. Any questions? Nancy Panosian.
I have a
Mr.
question.
Manukian has a question.
In the design review board meeting on December 1st, one of the conditions by the design review board was to reduce the number of dwelling units, and none were reduced.
The issue with the DRB, the first meeting was actually they wanted to reorganize the project. They felt it was too massive. The 26 units was a wording that was placed by the staff. It was actually a statement that was made by one of the architects, Mr. Aliano, and we addressed it specifically. That's why Mr. Aliano voted in favor of the project with this modification.
He was addressing the massing
The
or
massing
the number
itself.
of units?
No, the massing itself. And the massing was altered and dramatically changed. The opening of the courtyard was altered as well.
Okay.
So the matter was addressed to their satisfaction, as all 5 of them were in favor of it, 3 of them with modifications, 2 of them without any modifications. So they disagreed on that little issue. That was the only issue that was different.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Nancy Panosian.
My name is Nancy Panosian. Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem and members of the council and staff. I've lived in the city of Glendale for over 10 years. I have an office in the city. I'm very proud to call Glendale my home. It's our position that this request before you is an attempt to derail the project that's been addressed by the city staff before you. At the June 1, 2006 DRB hearing, all of the board members were in favor of this project. The issue as to massing, as you referenced, Councilman Manukian, it was the appearance of the project. They wanted to give it a more village-town feel, which we did. We changed the courtyard entrance, and we made all the changes they requested. The only minor correction that remained was they wanted us to increase the area of a recycling unit in the garage, and we plan to do that. But one of the reasons why it was so appealing to them was that there were no variances requested. It was totally code compliant. The project provides for a 9-foot dedication to create a sidewalk where no sidewalk exists, and would actually result in the widening of Monterey Road, which would address the pedestrian issues and traffic issues that were raised. And the board, or the DRB, felt that this would be a nice addition to the community and create a beautiful project in an area that was in much need of a cosmetic lift. Now, what I've handed out to the council, actually through the city clerk, is a packet, and I'll reference some of the exhibits as I address you. If you look at tab number 1, and actually this is a better photograph, Mayor Pro Tem Yusefian, you'd asked about the image of the proposed project. This is a rendering prepared by our architect of the proposed project, and this is what was submitted to DRB at their final approval at the June 1 hearing. There's a different schematic which is similar to what your staff has posted up at tab number 1 and what I prepared. I'd like to turn your attention to tab number 2, which actually is a track map, and I think it'll give you a good understanding why this project doesn't propose density problems that has been suggested. If you look at the track map, again, that's tab 2 and what I provided, and you compare Howard and Isabel Streets. They're identical cul-de-sacs, and Howard Street, with this proposed 26-unit development, will result in a total of 48 dwelling units on Howard Street when compared to the existing 70 units on Isabel Street. And I believe there was a question about a 3-story unit. One of the objections were there were no 3-story units in the area. There is, in fact, a 3-story unit on the adjacent Isabel Street. There was also questions about the number of units. It's actually 18 units in that project, and I see Ms. Wilkerson nodding her head, so I believe I'm correct. So the purpose of this diagram is to establish or to demonstrate that with this proposed construction, we're not going to increase the density from what it exists in its present state on Howard Street when compared to adjacent Isabel. One of the things which I believe was significant at the DRB hearing were the comments of Tom Mitchell, the Assistant Administrator of Traffic and Transportation, who I believe is here this evening. And his comments were...
Right behind you, and he's very happy that you...
And
he's taking notes to see where you misquote him.
I apologize.
He was smart enough not to answer the news press's phone call.
And I believe his comments at that hearing, which I've cited for you at tab 5 of what I've handed to you, rendered moot any issues as to pedestrian safety or traffic concerns. The city had done extensive studies and determined that this project didn't pose any significant impact on traffic. In fact, the city staff's report to you, which is appended with the minutes, indicates that the traffic problems in existence long predate this project and probably will continue even after this project. Also, what I have before you, tab number 3 and 4, is evidence from the city that there's no historic significance to the properties at the site. In fact, one of the 3 properties that's exactly on the corner of Howard and Monterey has in effect been condemned by the city attorney's office. There's code enforcement violation hearings relating to that property, which predated our ownership of the property, and the city attorney's been gracious enough to hold off on the enforcement proceedings because the property is in development. Again, no historical significance. There was a negative declaration prepared by the city.
Which one was that? 725 is the one that we have code enforcement against?
Correct, Your Honor. I'm sorry. Correct, Mayor Pro Tem. It's the corner unit, and I've been dealing with the city attorney's office on that.
Mr. Mayor Pro Tem, were you granting Ms. Panosian more time?
Yeah, a little
Just
bit more time.
A few seconds, please.
I gave her, the young lady over there, extra time, so I'm going to give her extra time.
Thank you. In closing, I wanted to comment on the credibility of this petition, and there's much reference to 250 signatures when, in fact, that's not the case. When I looked at the petition, I could decipher 178 signatures, which were legible to me. Of those 178, only 20 had addresses listed, which makes it impossible for me to determine who these people are, where they live, if they live on Howard, or even in the city of Glendale. And as the world is quite small sometimes, I recognize some of the names. And when I made contact with some of the people whom I recognized in the petition, you look at tab 7 of what I prepared, I found there were 4 signatures of people who don't even live in the city or anywhere near the area of the proposed construction, and provided me with letters of support withdrawing their objections that were listed in this initial petition. Also, at tab 8, I've included information about numerous people included on this petition who don't live in the city or anywhere in the vicinity of this proposed project. And I will note that many of the signatures...
A whole bunch of them that are highlighted. What does that mean? I can't tell.
What I've highlighted...
is the highlights the ones that live here or don't live here?
The ones that don't live here, if you look at the document that's attached to it, it will show the property ownership record, which shows they don't live at that area or anywhere near the area.
Okay.
In tab 7, there were letters of support.
I'm going to cut you off. Thank you very much.
And in closing, we believe this will be a beautiful addition to the city.
Off.
Thank you very much for your time. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was my last card. Public comment is closed. All right.
Questions?
Yes.
When and how was the property purchased? Was it purchased piece by piece or all of it together?
They were purchased piece by piece.
Could you come to the...
They were all purchased individually, separately.
And when were they purchased?
We started purchasing them in, I believe, 2003.
2003?
Yes. The last one was purchased in 2005.
Did you do your due diligence and check what the zoning was at the time you
Yes,
purchased
I did.
them?
And they were zone 1250. They had been so since 1989.
And are you a developer?
Yeah, well, along with my family, thank you.
You said you were a doctor? What kind
Yes,
of doctor are you?
I'm an orthopedic surgeon.
Okay, so you're doing this as an investment?
It's a family trade. We grew up with it. My father's the civil engineer.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay. Did you resolve the issue of the tiles?
Yes, they did.
Okay.
Everything's been resolved.
And the DRB member who had an issue with that is okay with it?
All conditions have been met.
Okay. And increase the recycling part?
We did indeed.
Okay. You originally were within the rules of the recycling, but I think Mr. Sinfrini wanted more.
And hence we did.
So you gave him more than what the code requires?
We doubled it per his request.
Okay. Thank you. Sorry, guys, I can't start first because I'm running the show, so somebody else has to.
Okay, I have a couple questions and some comments.
Okay.
Question number 1, we always ask this, why isn't this spot zone, Mr. Garcia? The proposed zone change.
Thank you, Mr. Najarian. Mr. Mayor Pro Tem and members of council, as with any zoning application, a question of whether or not something is an illegal spot zone falls in. There's 2 lines of inquiry. First, is a property being treated substantially different from others in the immediate vicinity? And even if it is, next question becomes, is there a legitimate government reason for doing it? As I sit here today, because we're in the position of the staff is in the position of seeking direction on whether it's zone change. We haven't made a determination it is or isn't. All we can tell you is that there are some, just looking at the map, there can be some legitimate reasons for this. For example, providing transitional buffers, as with some of our previous zonings. I'll also tell you that courts sometimes do look at zonings, rezonings a little bit more closely when they are geared or when they are intended to prevent or limit development, a particular development. And when I say they look a little bit more closely at it, doesn't mean that they strike them down. It just means that they look at for the specific reason the government is proffering for rezoning a particular area. So there are some bases here for rezoning this beyond just stopping one particular development project.
Okay. So you wouldn't think that that's an issue here, the spot zoning?
To be honest, we'd have to look at it more closely if the council direction was to initiate the zone change. But just from what I know here, there are some legitimate bases for rezoning.
R1 to the east.
Correct. And
potentially would be a transition. This zone would be a transition to.
Well, this doesn't.
That would be one reason for the rezoning.
And Mayor Pro Tem, if I can add something
you have
to
to
that.
do the whole thing. Yeah.
If you look at page 8, it's not actually numbered 8, but follows 7, there's that table, and you have the up-to-date table that's attached to your material. There's another 2 properties directly across the road from the subject condo development where there are 2 existing single-family homes. And when Kathy was putting this together, I asked her to reorganize this table, and that's why the sums were missed. But you'll see 716, 720, there are 2 existing houses on 2 lots, and that has a potential for 14 units under the 1250. After the 2250, it would go down to 7. So I think the argument that it only affects one property or one site substantially is something we could defend against, in that potential redevelopment area of those 2 lots would have quite a substantial change as well. I only raise that because in the previous discussion on North Central, the question was, does it affect primarily one lot? There were many that had small diminishments, but primarily one development site was affected. So I wanted to bring to your attention, there are 2 in this potential on Howard.
My other comment is what I've heard from many of the residents requesting the downzoning is that the traffic on Monterey is extremely high, and I'm aware of that. I drive it myself, but what I think we're seeing here is the design of the city. When I was on the Transportation and Parking Commission, when we were putting speed humps throughout the Ross Moines area, throughout the Cordoba, Cortez triangle there, it was our specific. Is Mr. Mitchell here?
Mm-hmm.
Here it is. Right, Tom?
No, he's
it
not
was our
escaped.
specific design
Come on up,
to
Mitch.
funnel the vehicles out of the neighborhoods, to bring them down Glendale Avenue, to have them go then westward on Monterey to access the Central Business District. Specifically, that was our design and our plan. And folks, when we put all those speed humps in the other neighborhoods, and some of us complain that this is going to cause traffic problems elsewhere, well, guess what? Here is the traffic problem elsewhere. And this is Monterey is the sacrificial lamb, if you will. This is the road that's going to continue to grow in traffic count. It's going to hopefully get some traffic signals, which were on the drawing board back when I was on in 97, 98, 99, indicating the city's commitment to an increased flow down Monterey, the thought being that it has the wash on one side. We can restrict parking to one side only, and this is the funnel that's going to deliver the vehicles to the downtown rather than have them cut through the myriad of streets, the Genevas, the Glen Oaks, the Ethels, and everything else in that area. So this is, this is not an accident. Traffic on Monterey is going to increase much more than any of the other streets, the neighborhood streets. In our short range, actually in our circulation element of our general plan, I think we've targeted Monterey as a I forget what the next classification is, a collector.
Minor arterial.
Minor arterial. So this is working the way the city has designed it to work. So by protecting our neighborhoods, and all you folks in Ross Moyne, et cetera, we've protected your neighborhood, but we've funneled all these cars right down here. So my bottom line is, the traffic that's being observed is not the traffic on the cul-de-sac of Howard Street. What's being observed is all the traffic going east and west on Monterey. So I don't see how the additional vehicles, and it didn't even meet the threshold of performing a traffic study. I think you said maybe 15 vehicle trips additional in the morning and in the afternoon. The big problem is on Monterey. The way we're going to solve that is perhaps through some widening, through some signalization. This project, and not looking particularly at the project, but hopefully any project that goes there is going to be parked to code plus and relieve some of the parking congestion that otherwise exists on those streets. So, Tom, am I right with these? Am I recalling the general concept of traffic flow and the cut through and the whole traffic calming notion that that council worked and agonized many, many meetings over?
Mayor Pro Tem, members of the council, I agree with everything you've said 100%. I think you depicted it very accurately. We identified even 10 years ago when I first came that there was a need on Monterey to try and get better traffic flow. We have the always stops at Geneva, Jackson, and Louise. They don't provide the breaks or gaps that you receive when those are signalized, and therefore when people do talk about being on the side streets, it does take a while to get out through there. Oftentimes you're forced to make a right turn out rather than a left because you just don't get the gaps in the peak hours. The problem that we've had with that is when we first identified those needs for those signals, they were maybe $75,000 a piece. Now traffic signals run closer to $200,000 a piece. So there's a real funding issue at that point. There's also an issue with the on-street parking that occurs. There's the short section in there between Jackson and Geneva. It's only 33 feet wide. We have parking on both sides because, as you've heard tonight, people say they have a shortage of parking. Any new development, whether it's the higher density or the lower, presumably would be parked to code, and that would start to solve some of that. But as long as we have to have on-street parking on both sides, which is the case today, we then have to share a center lane by two directions of travel. That slows things down as well through there. From a traffic calming standpoint, it may be good, but from a traffic flow standpoint, it is not good. So there is a congested area through there. We've done, as you mentioned, Mr. Najarian, just a quick trip generation study, and it really doesn't matter which of these two occur, whether it's the addition of 28 units or, I can't remember which ones it is now, pardon me for a moment. The R1250 would add 39 units, the R2250 18 units. Either one of these, that when you add the traffic onto Howard, is going to have less than a 1% increase in traffic on Monterey. So it's basically going to be unnoticed. Sure, there'll be an incremental increase of traffic on Howard itself, but in terms of traffic flow on Monterey, it really would be imperceptible. So if there are solutions that you seek on there, they really, in terms of traffic, they really would not be affected by whichever way the zoning were to change one way or the other.
Thank you. I have a question. You talk about three different traffic signals. $200,000 a pop, that's about $600,000 per intersection. If you had to pick, from your professional opinion, which one of those three will be the priority? Which one would you put in first? Let's say we want to put these traffic lights in, do them one a year. This way it's easier to swallow. Which one would you put in first? And I can understand what they're talking about. In the morning, I have driven through there. and that's the source that I use to go to Brand, or if I want to go to the Hilton, or if I want to go to Brand, that's the direction I go. I don't see a lot of issues in the morning. I do see a major issue in the afternoon. Generally, about 5:30 it starts and it goes till maybe about 6:30. Everybody's trying to use that to get to the freeway on-ramp and off-ramp off of Glendale Avenue, because Brand is a parking lot.
Right.
So the problem occurs is that there car after car after car, there is not a break so somebody can make even a right turn or a left turn. So if you want to create a break, you're going to have to put a signal somewhere to buy some time for the folks on these cul-de-sacs to be able to make a right and a left. Where would you put that first one?
Somewhat off the top of my head, I would say the one in the middle at Jackson would probably give better breaks, but I also would say that in two other ways. Number one, which I apologize I didn't bring with me, we maintain a listing of priority intersections to be signalized in the city, and they look at all the different warrants that Caltrans suggest be used, and that's what we use. And so there are 11 different warrants, and you only have to satisfy one. Some of those are the three intersection, I wish I could recall, has a slightly higher number of warrants being met. So in theory, you would go with that, and I wish I knew that at the moment. My guess is it is Jackson, but I'm not certain. But what I would say is in the last 5 years, there have been 28 accidents in that corridor between roughly Brand and Geneva. 11 of those have occurred at the intersection of Jackson and Monterey, and in looking at them quickly, it would appear that basically all of those would be corrected if it were signalized instead of the four-way stop. What we have today is a lot of frustration, a lot of people trying to push through two at a time, some broadside accidents. So from an accident perspective, there's no question that the signal at Jackson would be preferable.
And also, it would probably help your flow.
It would.
Because they won't have to stop on that stop. They're moving through, and that kind of will
the gaps
speed
that are
up.
created, I mean, there is east-west flow, especially in the peak hours, in the morning to and from the hook ramps at Monterey. But when the gaps are created is when the north-south flows occurs on that. So when they're flowing north-south on any of those three streets, then the traffic on Howard or Kenwood or Isabel, that's when they can make their turns out and go from there. Whereas right now, it's a steady pulse from each direction, and so it is difficult. That's one problem, just the amount of volume. Right now, Monterey carries 6,000 or 7,000 cars a day west of Geneva and almost 13,000 to the east, which are pretty significant volumes for just a two-lane roadway. One of the problems, though, is that as much as we would like to put more red curb in to enhance sight distance at the intersections, there's also the residents' demand for more on-street parking, so we don't have anywhere near as much as we would like to. Bottom line on that is it's more difficult to see, so you edge out, you're having to look both ways, the visibility isn't as great. Then another car comes, then you have to start all over again. So that's what happens.
If you put in a signal, let's say on Jackson, for sake of argument, would you take out the parking against the wash all the way, or just partly in certain areas?
Well, whether it's definitely if it were signalized, where you're right now, at least the east-west traffic comes to somewhat of a stop, California stop, whatever, but at least it's slowing down enough as it drives through. The problem is in the 33-foot section that I mentioned before.
And what is that?
Essentially from Louise east all the way to Geneva in the three-block section. And by having, in that 33 feet parking on both sides, you're left with about 17 feet in the middle. So that's essentially two 8.5-foot lanes, which is no wider than a parking space. A lot of the accidents that go unreported, but even some that we've seen in these mid-block areas, are people that are sideswiping one another. They have parking on both sides, and then the two have to go through. Their judgment isn't as good as they thought, so either mirrors are knocked off or they'll actually scrape one another. So if parking supply or parking demand were not such an issue, in a heartbeat, we would recommend getting rid of parking on one side or the other. If you get rid of on the north side, you're going to lose more parking spaces because there are no driveways, there are no intersecting streets basically over there.
But if you do on the south side, what's going to happen is people are going to park on the north side, and they're going to have to cross the traffic in mid-block.
Exactly.
And guess what happens? Maybe mirrors, we won't lose any mirrors, but we're sure as heck we're going to lose people because they're going to just run them down.
So on the north side, the likelihood of the sidewalk is really slim. I mean,
There is
right
none
now
there.
it's roughly about
None.
3 feet. It's got either power poles or oleander, and then you're in the wash. So it's very difficult to park on that side, at least on the south side. Granted, the sidewalk is either non-existent or very limited in that area, but we probably have some ideas how that might be able to be improved.
Let me answer this. We have about 3 feet before, we have some oleanders, and where is, because that probably is an easement that belongs to the state, how much of that, where is our property start? Is it start at curb, or does it go further? Can we widen the street from that side?
Well, my understanding, and I talked to the city engineer about that. We have a little bit conflicting information, but generally in that area, it's a 40-foot right-of-way. We got a 33-foot pavement, it's curb to curb, so we've got 7 feet. It's either 3 feet on the north side or 4 on the south, or vice versa. But by the time on the north side, when you put the power pole in there, even if it's a 4-foot, by the time the power pole's in there, and then you've got some oleander, then you're running into the chain link fence. Then after that, you're down in the wash. So I don't know who owns it, but I don't see where it ever would be of any value to us in trying to get anything significant from that.
If we took the oleanders out, it still wouldn't give us maybe a couple of
Well,
feet?
you're still, I mean, it's a refuge. It really wouldn't be a sidewalk because, again, there are these huge power poles that hit it right in the middle. So in some of those areas, you have less than a foot on each side of the power pole before you hit either the chain link fence or the face of the curb. I think if there's an opportunity with that, it's going to be on the south side through projects. And again, I'm not an advocate necessarily for the project, but as has been mentioned, there's a 9-foot dedication that's being done on that. One is to widen the street by 3 feet, so it's a start. At least it gets the pavement up to 36 feet, which could then preserve on-street parking on both sides. But then the balance of 6 foot goes onto a sidewalk, which could then make it, which would be very unique in this area, it would get it up to 9 or 10 feet. Now, that's only right now. There's still other things that have to be done, but if we got rid of parking on one side, and I think on the north side I calculated it's about 45 parking spaces on the north side between Louise and Geneva, where it's only about 28 or so on the south. So at first blush, it's best to take it away on the south, but again, from the safety standpoint, it goes the other direction.
And let me ask you one other thing. I understand in order for us to put that signal, you're saying that we need to have a 36-foot wide roadway, because that's the standards.
Well, that's it. If we, in an ideal world, if we wanted to maintain parking on both sides, it would certainly be better at that location if we could actually have 2 real travel lanes in each direction. If we're going to go through a signal at 25 or 30 and immediately funnel them into 16 feet, that could be a step backwards, quite frankly, from a safety standpoint.
Okay. And the reason, my logic was going, right now there's stop signs on Jackson.
Right.
So if you replace the stop signs and put in a signal, people still park on both sides with even a stop sign. So it may not improve the flow of traffic, but what it may do is it will create a break, and also you won't have this little rubbernecking trying to see what's coming on the corner. You would probably solve the accident issues.
It'll right at Jackson itself, yeah, I would agree with everything that you'd said. The part that we'd be concerned with is that as you get east and west of the signal where the traffic is now being funneled in, it'll be entering those tightened areas at 25 or 30 miles per hour, whereas now it's coming off from, not moving at all. So at least when someone's approaching them, it's easier to negotiate that as opposed to if people are both going 25 or 30, then there's just a greater likelihood that they're not going to travel through there as well, and you're going to get, again, more side swipes and that nature. It can be done. I mean, there's situations not just in Glendale but other where it just is that there's the priority made that the on-street parking is number one, and you do the best that you can with the other. No question there would be an improvement, and I would say in doing that, if Jackson were signalized, for example, it'd be the proverbial, we'll monitor it and see how it works. If we don't get accidents either east or west of Jackson, then, you know, it's fine. We could
Because that
maintain it.
reduces how many accidents you said?
Well, we had 11 over a 5-year period, which in itself is not a great number, but when you consider, I think there were only 28 to begin with, and 11 were all right there, and then a few mid-block on either side. The center area, for whatever reasons, seems to be a concentrated location.
The other thing that I wanted to ask you, in here it says there was no traffic impact analysis, and the reason for that is, it says it's not required by traffic and transportation for this project. This is because the trip generation of the project did not meet or exceed the minimum volume threshold, which is 50 trips in the morning and an evening peak. That triggered it. So you're still of the same opinion?
That's correct.
Any other questions for Mr. Quintero?
No, not questions.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, well, I'm less concerned with the traffic on Monterey. I think that's been at gridlock, and I don't see that it's going to be changing anytime soon. And so in the afternoons, I'm also around. I use Monterey quite a bit, and it's bumper to bumper all the way to the freeway. I think it has less to do with cut-through traffic through Rossmoyne than just people from the downtown heading for that interchange or to attempt to get on the freeway. But look, my opinion is for the past 20, 25 years, we have overdone it in these multifamily neighborhoods. And by overdone it, I mean we've built projects that are just too intense. There are just too many people in these multifamily neighborhoods. And it doesn't matter where you go, whether Margaret Hammond's always complaining about the southern portion of the city, but it's no different out towards Glen Oaks at the west end of the city. People in La Crescenta are complaining about the multifamily projects going in there. I just think there's just too much density. And in this particular, when you look at these short little cul-de-sacs, the idea of putting 26 units on this particular cul-de-sac, on this particular corner, is just too much. It's just too much. I mean, it doesn't go with the rest of those streets, number one, and going down to 2250 at 15 units, I think that makes a lot more sense for that neighborhood and just for Glendale in general. And even 18 units, I think even that number would be okay. But at 26, at 3 stories, it's a very well-designed building. The architect, I read who it was. He's a very good architect. I think he did a good job. But it's just too massive. There's just too many units for that short little street, and it's going to impact all of the surrounding neighborhoods. So I'm all for downzoning it to 2250, and I'm sure the developer could do just fine building 15 units, or if he could go to 18 units, or if they could go to 18 units. But at any rate, for me, 26 is too much, and it's symptomatic of the whole city. All we do is complain about traffic and lack of parking and the schools, et cetera, but here goes another unit that, or another project that just has too many units.
Well, let me tell you where I stand on this. I have a core value, and my core value is I'm against spot zoning. I voted against the Area 14. I voted against changing the zone from ROS to R1 on Chevy Chase, even though the developer was begging to do that, because I didn't think that was right. Howard, we didn't get a vote on, because if I did, I would have voted against that too, because I think that's still spot zoning. The bottom line to me is, this is the zoning in City of Glendale. We created this in 1986. In 1986, there was a lot of hearing, a lot of property owners were involved, and there was if you think this is something, this is nothing. There were hundreds, thousands of people who showed up. And there was a lot of pushing and pulling and changing, and in the end of the day, this is the zoning that was agreed upon. Everybody ended up paying their share. What I have an issue with, some people who got to enjoy their old zoning and got to build to its maximum capabilities would like to keep other people from enjoying the same zoning and the same rights that was granted to them. That I have a problem with. Now, if a developer had walked in and wanted more than what the code allowed, then I would have a problem with. This is not the case. As a matter of fact, this is less than what the code allowed. Now, I watched both Design Review Board meetings on this, the first one and the second one, because I already knew about this issue through the fact that Ms. Wilkerson had tipped us off that there are people who are questioning this issue and they would like some type of a zoning. So I said, okay, I want to see what is it that they're proposing. And to be honest with you, your first design left a lot to be desired, and it was a little massive, and it was oriented differently. Your courtyard was basically facing Monterey instead of the other way. I think for purpose of design itself, I think you did a better job by turning it around, because it made the courtyard more usable. People don't want to be sitting there enjoying traffic. They like to sit there and enjoy something a little bit quieter. I watched both design review. The second time around, it was a pretty 5-0 vote. The people who talked about it, they're absolutely accurate. The only difference was Mr. Zinfrini and Mr. Tyson felt the project was fine just the way it was. He did not want to add more square footage for recycling, and he had no problem with the kind of tiles that they were talking about. The other three felt that there needs to be some modifications. They wanted something better, more than just the minimum. And Mr. Aliano, bless his heart, he's a very, very good architect, and he was very careful, and he wanted to make sure that the fenestration and all the stuff worked with the whole building. In the end of the day, it passed, even Mr. Aliano, who had issues with the massing. And the issue of massing and scale has nothing to do with the number of units. You could have a project that has fewer units that could be more massive than a project that has more units. So I want to make that very clear. Now, this project solves problems. This project's problem solving is what? 9 feet of right-of-way is going to be taken out. The developer is going to pay for the street widening and to create a sidewalk. The street is going to be widened in that area and have a sidewalk that you can walk and not worry about getting hit by a car because it's so narrow. In my mind, it also eliminates an issue of blight on that street. I've driven by there. I look at it. I went back and specifically looked at it. Now, a couple of the houses on the other two, they're not bad. Actually, one of them looks pretty nice with the one palm tree. I thought that was a pretty nice-looking house. But let's not forget, this council, on another property on a cul-de-sac, went and bought a vacant lot, and we're going to put 11 affordable housing by Habitat for Humanity. Something similar to this. This morning around noon, actually about 2:30, this council, with Mr. Manukian being absent, talked about another project on Garfield. And some of my colleagues were very happy with a 24-unit project, which was over the minimum requirement, which was 22. But all of those projects met their parking standard. This project creates the parking units that is required and also guest parking. There's only two things that I have a concern with, actually one. One is the parking, actually two. The second one is emergency access to the area. And my question is there some kind of condition that says as you drive in, kind of bode right now, is that going to be changed, or is there some kind of an area there that you can keep people from parking, so in case a fire truck comes in, can make that turn? Are we making that part? I'm looking at you. Yes. Are we making that a part of the condition?
Mr. Mayor Pro Tem, members of the council, we did not recommend that, and I don't believe Fire made mention. I had heard something alluded to that Fire said it would be nice, but I don't think they said that it was imperative. At cul-de-sac now, it's a 40-foot diameter. It's fairly standard. It can easily accommodate on-street parking and a standard vehicle to make the turn.
A standard vehicle?
A standard vehicle.
With a fire truck
right,
turn?
Yeah. A paramedic can make the turn, but when you start to get into the larger vehicles, they cannot make that turn. They have to
And
make
that was
multiple
one thing that I observed, and I went there. There were cars parked in that cul-de-sac on both sides.
Right.
Now, I had no problem with my little MR2. I can whiz around that. That's no problem. But I could tell if those cars were parked there, and if we had to have just an engine, I'm not talking about a ladder truck, just an engine in there, it's going to have a difficult time of making that turn. And if there was anything, I would suggest that you look at, because we are not doing this on this project, as you go through the approval process, I think it would be a good idea to put some kind of a condition there that at least on one side you eliminate some of that parking so a fire truck can easily make that turn and get out.
Well, speaking for Chief Gray, I'm sure he would have no objection to
I think
that.
he'll be very happy.
He'd be very happy with that. We would
Check
have
with the
no-
fire department. I think they have a reverse on fire trucks, so they should be able to back out of there without any problems. Going to take parking off of that cul-de-sac for the probability of an engine having to make a turn. That's why you have a reverse on big vehicles, so you can back out. I don't think that's...
To back to Monterey, you mean?
Yeah. Don't see how that's necessary.
That was one of the issues that they had brought up, because I watched them on DRB and they brought that specific issue up, saying that they couldn't make that turn. So, and there's a solution to that. You don't have to do it in the whole cul-de-sac. You could just do it on one side.
I think
And
it
so-
demonstrates that a recurring theme on this is the lack of on-street parking. And true, if everything were redeveloped and all parked to code, then I guess in theory you wouldn't really need any of the on-street parking, but there's a lot of catch-up on that. But the site distance issues they bring up, and then they also say, again, we need on-street parking. The emergency access is brought up, but again, we need on-street parking. So it's, they can't have it both ways is what it really comes down to.
And that's the thing that I'm having a hard time, because the 10 unit does not have guest parking. So some of their guest parks on the streets. This project not only has the number of parking that is required for its tenants, on top of that, they have guest parking, which the guests will go in there and park. Now, granted, the 10 unit was built at a time that did not require that. The code was different. So they built it according to code in 1982. But I think trying to put all the ills of the area, and it's not just this cul-de-sac, on a project, I don't think it's appropriate. I also think that we should, regardless of this item, we should move forward, and I hope I have some support from my colleagues, that we should move forward and put in a signal on Jackson, because I drive that either north-south or east-west, and there are issues even north-south.
This is a zoning issue, though.
I know.
Well, actually, the second proposed motion is to direct staff to look at traffic improvements, so.
Right.
You're right on.
Right. Right.
You're not exceeding your Brown Act authority.
No, I know. I'm saved. I don't go to jail. I make a lot of people upset. They were hoping for that.
I was in favor of the first motion, actually, but
Well, what I...
Jail?
Yeah, you go for that, huh?
first motion didn't have me coming back.
Right. Okay. So that's where I'm at. I think for us, try and give me an analogy. You have a headache, and you go to the doctor, and he cuts your foot off. What does one have to do with others? Bad analogy, maybe, but let me tell you something. You have a traffic problem. Your traffic problem is not caused by this project. Because guess what? You have it today. Without anything. You have it today. So the best thing to do is to solve your traffic problem. And if we do nothing, and this guy doesn't build, your traffic problem doesn't go away. It doesn't. The only way to solve the problem is what the traffic and engineering is telling us to do. And I think we need to move in that direction. A little bit at a time. We just went ahead and found $1.5 million to loan to our friends in the college. You know what?
No, we didn't.
We did. We loaned it to them.
We offered it to them.
We offered.
Whether
well,
they take it or not is not.
Well, but we did offer, which means we found some money somewhere to loan it to people. You know what?
They turned it down already.
Well, but this is something that we should do. We know this. I've been driving Jackson for 30 years, and I've always asked myself, why isn't there a signal here? Why isn't there a signal here? So I don't want to wait until I'm 60 or 80 before I get a signal. And believe me, in 30 years, it's not going to be $200,000. It'll be $1 million. So might as well do it now while it's cheaper. That's mine. Mr. Starver.
Mr. Yusefian, the traffic study that's been referenced would bring you back information on the impacts of a traffic signal and the earlier question of where should it be located. We would also bring you back at that time the other priorities that traffic and transportation has for signals in this town, and you can only imagine there's a list far longer than the resources that are available to install traffic signals, and the council can then give us direction on what you'd like to do. It may be a distinction without a great deal of substance, but as I referenced during the discussion with the college loan, the loan technically doesn't take funds away from other capital projects because you're changing one asset for another asset in the general fund. That's why my recommendation was that you not utilize CIP funds, because that would take money away from other projects.
But we have $1 million in the CIP for reserve.
You do.
So we do have that flexibility to use some of that money to resolve some of these traffic issues.
You do. And my encouragement to the council is, and ultimately you have to make the decision, is we have traffic and transportation bring you back the whole list of intersections and streets that are in need of traffic signals, because believe me, it's a long list. Mr. Mayor Pro Tem, it might be useful also at this point, if your discussion is generally completed, to talk about the process before you, and if indeed this were approved, the process that would follow this. We did receive some emails from individuals that seemed to imply tonight was the question of whether this property would be rezoned or not rezoned. Tonight's actually the question of whether the council would want to initiate the process to consider the rezoning, not necessarily the rezoning itself. And that process, in summary form, if indeed you begin the process, would be a report to the Planning Commission and a potential ordinance for rezoning, public hearings at that level, the Planning Commission making recommendations back to the City Council for another public hearing at that point, and then, as necessary, a 4/5 vote, assuming there's no protest, or a 5/5 vote would be required if there were a protest to actually implement a zone change. Correct? So tonight would just be to start a process that doesn't necessarily mean it's guaranteed that a zone change is going to occur.
Well, I don't like playing games with people, so I got pulled aside several weeks ago with a good friend of mine sitting back there in blue, and she asked me, and I've known her for many, many years. We worked together on the Eileen Givens campaign and goes even further. So I just want to let you know that I make decisions based on facts, and I am not going to come in here and tell people that I will be voting for this down zone. Just want to make that very clear. Now, this is going to require at least a 4/5 vote, and if you don't
Looks like
have...
there's 20% too, actually.
And there's a 20%, and I'm looking at this thing, and I'm looking at the area that's going to be downzoned, and the bottom line is they have more than 20% if they file a protest, which is going to require 5-0 votes. So,
Mr. Mayor Pro Tem, if I can, my comments weren't directed at that. It was just that we did get some emails from individuals who felt that this was actually the rezone. I thought it might be useful. People understood this
It's
was
not
just
the
a
rezone.
question.
It's just a hearing.
Just a question. It's actually not a hearing. It's just a question before you
Informational.
by the residents who would like you to initiate the process for rezone, which again doesn't tie the city council to ultimately deciding one way or the other.
and do we need to know at least if we have some semblance of getting the vote for that? Or do you guys like to go out there and chase your tail around and come back in here
It's
and you don't
entirely
get
up to you whether you want to express your views in that regard, but you would later on
let me
have a
ma-
public hearing with public input
Yeah,
before you
I'll
vote to
make
make a
the
decision.
motion. I'll make the motion to direct staff to initiate rezoning the 700 block of Howard Street from R-1250 to R-2250. Do I have a second?
Is there a second?
The motion dies for lack of a second.
That's up to the
Motion
chair.
dies with the lack of a second. Is there a motion for C2, which is directing staff to report traffic conditions and possible traffic improvements?
I'll move 8C2.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Roll call.
Well, just for clarification, is this, are we referencing the list of priorities for traffic signals? Is this what you were referencing to? Mr.
This would be the traffic
is
study
the general-
essentially, but
Okay, but also I'll modify the motion, but also to include a list of other possible traffic.
And again, it would be my intent that we would provide that to you as part of that analysis,
This will
assuming
be
the
part of the
analysis
staff
would
report.
recommend a signal. We'll include it as part of the staff report.
Okay.
Mayor Pro Tem, there are other issues that we would address, including sidewalks and safety
Mm-hmm.
and so on.
Yeah, it'd be broader than just a signal.
Okay.
I'll second.
There's an amended
Second.
motion and a second. Roll call.
Council members Milliken. Yes. Najarian.
Yes.
Quintero.
Yes.
Mayor Weaver. Mayor Pro Tem Yusefian.
Aye. What's next, please?
There are no hearings or reports or written communications. Is there any new business? Is there a
New
motion
business?
to adjourn?
We have none. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second. We're adjourned.